Struggling single CEO meets mom with 4 kids begging for food. What he learns shocks him and leaves him completely in love with them. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The polished Italian leather of Maxwell Grant's shoes clicked against the marble floor of his empty penthouse. The sound echoed through the vast space, reminding him of how alone he truly was. At 42, Maxwell had everything money could buy: a successful tech company, a luxury high-rise apartment overlooking the city skyline, and a reputation as one of the most ruthless businessmen in the industry. Yet tonight, like most nights, he would dine alone. Maxwell loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of 18-year-old scotch. The amber liquid swirled in the crystal glass as he gazed out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city lights below. Tomorrow marked the 5th anniversary of Market Fusion, the company he had built from nothing. It should have been a time for celebration, but the board meeting scheduled for the morning loomed over him like a dark cloud. 5 years of relentless work, of sacrificing everything: his marriage, his health, his peace of mind, and now it was all at risk. The latest financial report sat on his glass coffee table, the numbers telling a grim story. Market Fusion was hemorrhaging money, losing clients to newer, more innovative competitors. The board was getting restless, and rumors of a potential coup to remove him as CEO were circulating. Maxwell took a long sip of his scotch, the liquid burning his throat as he swallowed. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Final report revised. Numbers still don't look good. Board expecting turnaround plan tomorrow. He sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. There was no turnaround plan. Not yet. He had spent weeks trying to find a solution, but nothing seemed viable. The industry was evolving, and somehow he had failed to evolve with it. The divorce 3 years ago had taken more than just his focus away from the business. Caroline had been his sounding board, his reality check. Without her, he had become isolated, surrounded only by yes-men eager to please the boss. No one to tell him when he was making a mistake. No one to challenge his thinking. Maxwell's stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since the meager salad at lunch. He opened his refrigerator, nearly empty except for some expired milk, a few takeout containers, and a bottle of champagne he had been saving for a celebration that now seemed unlikely to come. He grabbed his coat and keys. The clock on the wall read 9:30 p.m. Most restaurants in the upscale district where he lived would still be serving. He needed to get out of this empty apartment, away from the reports and projections that spelled his professional doom. The cool night air hit his face as he stepped out of his building. Maxwell decided to walk rather than call his driver. The exercise would do him good, clear his head. Perhaps inspiration would strike, and he would figure out how to save his company from the brink of disaster. He walked past the gleaming storefronts of luxury brands, their displays showcasing items that cost more than what most people earned in a month. Once, these things had given him satisfaction. The expensive watches, the designer suits, the rare collectibles. Now they seemed hollow, meaningless trinkets that failed to fill the void in his life. Lost in thought, Maxwell didn't realize how far he had wandered until the scenery around him changed. The polished facades of upscale boutiques gave way to more modest businesses. Many closed for the night. He had reached the edge of downtown, where the city's prosperity began to fade into less affluent neighborhoods. He should turn back, find a restaurant in his district. But something compelled him to continue walking, as if the answers he sought lay in this unfamiliar territory. The rain that had been threatening all evening finally began to fall. First a gentle mist, then a steady downpour. Maxwell cursed under his breath. He had no umbrella, and the nearest taxi stand was blocks away. He quickened his pace, looking for shelter. Ahead, he spotted a small diner, its windows glowing warmly in the rainy darkness. "Jenny's," read the simple sign above the door. It wasn't his usual type of establishment, but it would provide refuge from the rain. A bell jingled as he pushed open the door. The diner was nearly empty. An elderly couple in one booth, a solitary man reading a newspaper at the counter. The air smelled of coffee and grilled food, surprisingly comforting. "Sit anywhere, honey. I'll be right with you," called a waitress from behind the counter. Maxwell chose a booth near the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with a kind smile and tired eyes, approached with a menu. "Terrible night to be caught in the rain," she said, placing the laminated menu in front of him. "Coffee?" "Please." Maxwell nodded, realizing how cold his hands had become. As she poured the coffee, Maxwell noticed a commotion outside. Through the rain-blurred window, he could see a woman huddled under the diner's awning. 4 small children clustered around her. They were soaking wet, their clothes clinging to their thin frames. The waitress followed his gaze. "Oh, that's Sarah and her kids," she said quietly. "They come by sometimes on nights like this. Jenny, the owner, usually gives them some soup or yesterday's muffins." Maxwell watched as one of the children, a girl no more than 6, looked through the window, her large eyes meeting his for a brief moment before she turned away. "They're homeless?" Maxwell asked, a strange discomfort settling in his chest. "Not exactly," the waitress replied. "Sarah's got a place, but it's not much. Her husband died last year, cancer, no insurance. She works 2 jobs, but with 4 kids." She shook her head. "Some nights, especially at the end of the month when money's tight, they come here rather than go hungry." Outside, the woman, Sarah, was trying to arrange her coat to shield the smallest child, a boy who appeared to be around 3 from the rain. Before Maxwell could respond, the diner's door opened and Jenny, a stout woman with graying hair tied back in a bun, emerged from the kitchen. She looked toward the window, then sighed. "Maggie, wrap up 4 of those blueberry muffins from this morning and a couple of those soup containers we were going to throw out," she instructed the waitress. "I've got it," Maxwell found himself saying, standing up. "And whatever else they might want to eat." The words surprised him as much as they did Jenny and the waitress. Jenny eyed him suspiciously. "This isn't a charity case for rich folks to feel good about themselves." Maxwell felt his face flush. "I didn't mean, I just—" He faltered, unused to being challenged. Jenny's expression softened slightly. "You want to help? That's fine. But Sarah's got her pride. Don't make her feel like a charity case." Maxwell nodded, chastened. "Understood." Jenny went to the door and called out to Sarah and her children, "Sarah, get in here before you all catch pneumonia." The door opened and Sarah entered, her children trailing behind her like ducklings. Up close, Maxwell could see that she was younger than he'd initially thought, probably in her early 30s, though exhaustion had etched lines around her eyes and mouth. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and despite her wet clothes and obvious fatigue, she carried herself with dignity. "Jenny, I don't want to impose," Sarah began, her voice soft but firm. "We were just waiting for the rain to let up a bit." "Nonsense," Jenny replied. "Sit down. Maggie's getting some soup heated up." Sarah hesitated, then nodded gratefully. She guided her children to a booth across from Maxwell's. The youngest boy clung to her leg, while the older 3, 2 girls and another boy, slid into the booth obediently. "Thank you," Sarah said to Jenny, her eyes betraying how much the simple kindness meant to her. Maxwell watched the interaction, feeling like an intruder. The family's clothing was clean but worn, their shoes showing signs of extensive repair. Yet there was something in the way the children sat close to each other, protective and loving, that stirred something in him. The oldest girl, around 10, noticed his gaze and stared back with unmasked suspicion. Her eyes, so like her mother's, held a wisdom and wariness beyond her years. She shifted slightly, positioning herself between Maxwell's line of sight and her younger siblings. Maggie brought out bowls of steaming soup and a basket of bread for the family, along with a tray of muffins. "Here you go, Sarah. Kids, don't eat too fast now, it's hot." "What do we say?" Sarah prompted gently. "Thank you," the children chorused, their eyes lighting up at the sight of food. Maxwell turned back to his own coffee, which had grown cold. He signaled Maggie for a refill, trying not to stare at the family, yet unable to look away completely. When Maggie brought his fresh coffee, she leaned in and whispered, "The little one, Ethan, he's got asthma. Medical bills are killer. That's why they're tight this month." Maxwell nodded, unsure why she was telling him this. He wasn't the type to get involved in strangers' problems. He had enough of his own. Yet as he sipped his coffee, his eyes kept drifting back to Sarah and her children. There was something about them. The way the oldest girl made sure her siblings had bread before taking her own. The way Sarah wiped the youngest boy's chin with such gentle care. The quiet dignity with which they ate their simple meal. Against his better judgment, Maxwell rose from his booth and approached their table. The oldest girl immediately tensed, her arm moving protectively in front of her brother. "Excuse me," Maxwell said, addressing Sarah. "I couldn't help but overhear. I'm sorry about your situation." Sarah's expression closed off. "We're fine, thank you," she said politely, but firmly. Maxwell realized he was handling this all wrong. "I'm sorry that came out wrong, He paused, unaccustomed to being at a loss for words. In boardrooms, he commanded attention effortlessly. Here, facing this proud woman and her watchful children, he felt oddly powerless. "I'm Maxwell," he finally said, offering his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah took it. "Sarah Thompson. These are my children, Lily, Emma, Jack, and Ethan." Lily, the oldest, continued to eye him warily. Emma, who looked to be around 8, offered a small smile. Jack, perhaps 5, was too busy eating to pay much attention. Little Ethan stared at him with wide, curious eyes. "Nice to meet you all," Maxwell said, feeling increasingly awkward. I was wondering if I could join you. It seems silly to sit alone when there's company to be had." Sarah looked surprised, then suspicious. Maxwell couldn't blame her. A well-dressed stranger showing interest in a struggling family would raise anyone's guard. "I promise I don't have any—" Maxwell fumbled for words, realizing how predatory he must seem. Surprisingly, it was Lily who broke the tension. "You can sit if you want," she said, her voice carrying authority beyond her years. "But I'm watching you." Despite the seriousness of her tone, Maxwell found himself smiling. "I'd expect nothing less," he replied. Sarah's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. She nodded toward the empty space beside her. "Please, join us." As Maxwell sat down, he couldn't shake the feeling that this rainy night encounter was about to change something fundamental in his life. The board meeting tomorrow, the failing company, his empty penthouse, all of it seemed suddenly distant, as if belonging to another person entirely. Little did he know just how right that feeling would prove to be. An awkward silence settled over the booth as Maxwell adjusted to his new seat. The children stared at him with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. Ethan, the youngest, reached out a small hand to touch Maxwell's silk tie, fascinated by its sheen. "Ethan, no." Sarah gently caught his hand. "We don't touch people without asking." "It's fine," Maxwell assured her, surprising himself with how little he minded the sticky fingerprints on his $400 tie. "I'm not much good with kids, I'm afraid. Never had any of my own." "Daddy died," Ethan announced matter-of-factly, a statement that caused Sarah to flinch slightly. "He's in heaven now." Maxwell met Sarah's eyes briefly, seeing the pain she tried to hide. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. Sarah nodded, her fingers absently stroking Ethan's hair. "It's been 14 months. David, my husband, He was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, she trailed off, clearly not wanting to discuss such matters in front of her children. Lily, still watching Maxwell carefully, changed the subject. "Why are you wearing such fancy clothes just to eat at Jenny's?" "Lily," Sarah admonished gently, "that's not polite." Maxwell smiled. "It's a fair question. I was actually on my way somewhere else when it started raining. I just needed to get out of my apartment for a while." He paused, considering how much to share with these strangers. "I've got a big meeting tomorrow that I'm not looking forward to." "Are you in trouble?" Jack asked innocently, tomato soup staining the corners of his mouth. Maxwell chuckled despite himself. "Something like that. My company isn't doing very well right now." "What kind of company?" Sarah asked, seeming genuinely interested. "Tech. Digital marketing, specifically. We create platforms for businesses to reach customers online." Even as he said it, Maxwell realized how dry and corporate it sounded, how disconnected from real life, from people like Sarah and her children. Emma, who had been quietly eating her soup, spoke up. "My teacher says computers are the future. She lets us use the ones at school sometimes, but we don't have one at home." "Emma's the smart one," Lily said proudly. "She's already reading at a 5th grade level, and she's only in 2nd grade. Emma blushed and ducked her head, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. "That's impressive," Maxwell said, meaning it. "What do you like to read, Emma?" "Everything," Emma replied softly, "but especially books about animals and science. I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up." Maxwell nodded approvingly, then glanced at Lily. "And what about you? What are you interested in?" "Taking care of my family," Lily answered without hesitation, her young face solemn. "I help Mom a lot." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Lily's hand. "She does. Lily's my right hand. I don't know what I'd do without her help with the little ones." The pride in Sarah's voice was evident, but Maxwell detected something else. Regret, perhaps, that her eldest daughter had to shoulder so much responsibility at such a young age. "Mom works at the hospital at night," Jack volunteered, "and at the grocery store in the day." "Not every day," Sarah clarified, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm a night shift nursing assistant at Mercy General, and I work part-time stocking shelves at Save Mart 3 days a week." Maxwell did the mental math. Night shifts at the hospital, daytime hours at a grocery store, and 4 children to care for in between. "When did she sleep?" As if reading his thoughts, Sarah added, "I'm trying to get into the nursing program at the community college. Better hours, better pay. But between work and the kids..." She shrugged, leaving the sentence unfinished. "You'll do it, Mom," Lily said with fierce conviction. "You're the smartest person I know." Sarah smiled at her daughter, love and gratitude evident in her tired eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart." Maggie approached with a coffee pot. "Refills? And can I get you anything else?" "I think we're fine, thank you," Sarah began, but Maxwell interrupted. "Actually, could we see dessert menus?" "My treat," he added quickly, seeing Sarah about to protest. "Please, it would make my evening to share dessert with such good company." Sarah hesitated, clearly torn between pride and the desire to give her children a treat. The hopeful expressions on the children's faces seemed to decide it for her. "That's very kind of you," she conceded. "Thank you." As Maggie handed out laminated dessert menus, Maxwell watched the children's faces light up. Even Lily's guarded expression softened as she and Emma put their heads together, discussing the options in excited whispers. "The apple pie is homemade," Maggie told them with a wink. "Jenny's grandmother's recipe." "Can we share one, Mom?" Jack asked, looking at the prices. "You don't have to share," Maxwell said quickly. "Everyone can have their own dessert." 4 pairs of wide eyes turned to their mother for confirmation. Sarah hesitated again, then nodded. "If Mr. Maxwell is sure, then yes, you can each have your own." "Just Maxwell, please," he said, feeling oddly formal being addressed as Mr. by this family. The children placed their orders: apple pie for Jack, chocolate cake for Lily, ice cream sundae for Emma, and a cookie for Ethan. Sarah declined, saying she was still full from the soup, though Maxwell suspected she was simply trying to minimize the expense. "Please, have something," Maxwell encouraged. "The pie does sound good, doesn't it?" After a moment, Sarah relented and ordered a slice of pie as well. As Maggie departed with their dessert orders, Maxwell found himself genuinely curious about this family. "So, how old are all of you?" he asked the children. "I'm 10, Lily answered. "Emma's 8, Jack is 5, and Ethan is 3. "And a half," Ethan added importantly, holding up 3 pudgy fingers. Maxwell smiled. "And a half. Very significant." "Do you have kids?" Jack asked, crumbling a remaining piece of bread between his fingers. "No," Maxwell replied. "I was married once, but we divorced a few years ago. No children." "Why did you get divorced?" Jack continued, earning him a gentle, "Jack, that's private," from his mother. Maxwell waved off her concern. "It's all right. We wanted different things, I suppose. Caroline, my ex-wife, she wanted a family, a normal life. I was always working, building my company. In the end, she couldn't compete with my ambition, and I couldn't give her what she needed." He hadn't meant to reveal so much, especially to strangers, but something about the diner's warmth and the family's genuine interest made the words flow more easily than they had in years. "Do you miss her?" Emma asked softly. Maxwell blinked, taken aback by the perceptiveness of the question. He considered lying, giving the easy answer, but found he couldn't. "Yes," he admitted. "Not every day anymore, but yes, I miss her." Sarah gave him a look of understanding that made him feel both exposed and comforted. Before the conversation could continue, Maggie arrived with their desserts, setting out the plates with flourish. "Eat up while it's still warm," she encouraged, sliding the pie in front of Sarah with an extra dollop of whipped cream. The next few minutes were filled with appreciative sounds as the children dove into their treats. Even Sarah seemed to momentarily forget her worries as she savored the homemade pie. Maxwell, who had ordered coffee rather than dessert, found himself enjoying their pleasure more than he would have enjoyed any sweet treat himself. "You mentioned Ethan has asthma?" he asked Sarah quietly while the children were distracted with their desserts. Sarah nodded, her expression growing serious. "He was diagnosed last year. The medication is expensive, even with the assistance program I qualified for. His inhaler, the preventative medication, it adds up quickly." "And insurance?" "We're on Medicaid now, but there are still co-pays and some specialists aren't covered." She sighed. "We're managing. It's just tight sometimes, especially at the end of the month when the rent is due." Maxwell nodded, feeling a growing respect for this woman who faced such enormous challenges with dignity and determination. His own problems, a failing company, an upcoming board meeting, suddenly seemed trivial in comparison. "What about family? Do you have anyone to help?" he asked. "My parents are both gone. David's mother helps when she can, but she's on a fixed income herself." Sarah smiled ruefully. "It's just us, really. But we make it work." "You're doing an amazing job," Maxwell said sincerely. "Your children are wonderful." Sarah's eyes softened, and for the first time that evening, her smile reached them. "Thank you. They're everything to me." As they finished their desserts, Maxwell noticed Ethan struggling to keep his eyes open, his head bobbing as he fought sleep. "We should get going," Sarah said, noticing the same thing. "It's way past their bedtime, and they have school tomorrow." "Is it far to your place?" Maxwell asked, concerned as he noticed the rain still falling heavily outside. Sarah hesitated. "About 12 blocks. We'll be fine. The rain's letting up a bit." It wasn't, but Maxwell understood her reluctance to accept more help. "Let me call a car for you," he offered. "I have an account with a car service. It's no trouble at all." "That's really not necessary," Sarah began, but Lily interrupted. "Mom, Ethan's tired, and it's really raining hard." Sarah looked at her youngest son, who was now leaning against her, barely awake. After a moment, she nodded. "All right, thank you. That would be helpful." Maxwell pulled out his phone and requested a car. "It'll be here in 5 minutes. Would it be all right if I walked you out?" Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, Maxwell approached the counter to pay their bill. "That'll be $43.75, Jenny told him, watching as he pulled out his wallet. Maxwell handed her a $100 bill. "Keep the change, please, for the next time Sarah and her kids come in." Jenny eyed him appraisingly, then nodded once. "You're all right," she said simply, taking the bill. Outside, the rain had indeed lessened to a steady drizzle. Maxwell's car service had sent a large SUV, which easily accommodated Sarah and all 4 children. As they climbed in, Ethan now fast asleep in his mother's arms, Sarah turned to Maxwell. "Thank you for dinner, and the car. It was really kind of you." "It was my pleasure, truly," Maxwell replied. "Would it be all right if—" He hesitated, then continued. "Would it be all right if I checked in on you sometime? Maybe I could help with Ethan's medication or something." Sarah's pride visibly warred with practical need. "We're not a charity case," she said quietly, echoing Jenny's earlier words. "I know that," Maxwell assured her, "but everyone needs help sometimes. Even me." After a long moment, Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a worn notepad and pencil. She scribbled something on it and handed the paper to Maxwell. "That's my number. If you're serious about helping with Ethan's medication, we can talk, but only that." Maxwell took the paper carefully, as if it were something precious. "Thank you. I'll call you tomorrow." As the car pulled away, Maxwell stood in the rain, watching until the taillights disappeared around a corner. He had arrived at Jenny's diner feeling lost and alone, dreading the board meeting that might end his career. Now, hours later, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. With Sarah's number in his pocket, Maxwell turned and began the long walk back to his penthouse, barely noticing the rain that soaked through his expensive suit. For the first time in months, his mind wasn't consumed by Market Fusion's problems. Instead, he was thinking about a proud single mother, 4 remarkable children, and how he might be able to help them, and perhaps, in the process, help himself. Maxwell awakened with a start, momentarily disoriented by the sunlight streaming through his bedroom windows. He had forgotten to close the blinds last night. Groaning, he reached for his phone to check the time. 6:15 a.m. The board meeting was scheduled for 9:00. As he sat up, memories of the previous evening washed over him. The diner, Sarah and her children, the quiet dignity with which they faced their struggles. Maxwell reached for the nightstand where he had placed Sarah's number before collapsing into bed, relieved to find it still there. The paper was slightly crumpled, the handwriting hurried but neat. Below the phone number, Sarah had written her full name, Sarah Thompson. Seeing it in writing made their encounter feel more real somehow, less like a strange dream brought on by stress and scotch. Maxwell showered and dressed methodically, selecting one of his most expensive suits, armor for the battle ahead. As he knotted his tie, his thoughts drifted to Ethan's fascination with the silk material, those tiny fingerprints that had probably cost more to remove than what Sarah earned in an hour. The absurdity of it hit him suddenly, and he found himself chuckling alone in his vast bathroom. Over coffee in his sleek kitchen, Maxwell pulled up his presentation for the board meeting one last time. The numbers hadn't magically improved overnight. Market Fusion was still losing market share, still hemorrhaging clients. His proposed solutions, cost-cutting measures, a restructuring of the sales department, a new marketing initiative, felt hollow even to him. What would Sarah think of all this? The thought came unbidden. Here he was, panicking over a failing company while she worked 2 jobs, cared for 4 children, and still somehow maintained her dignity and warmth. What would someone like her do in his position? Maxwell closed his laptop, a new idea beginning to form. It was risky, unconventional, but perhaps that was exactly what Market Fusion needed right now. Before leaving for the office, he pulled out his phone and the crumpled note with Sarah's number. It was early, probably too early to call, but he could at least send a text to let her know he hadn't forgotten his promise. "Good morning, Sarah. This is Maxwell from the diner last night. I hope you all got home safely and had a good night's rest. I'd like to help with Ethan's medication as we discussed. Let me know when would be a good time to talk about this. Have a good day." He read it over twice, trying to strike the right tone. Friendly but respectful, helpful without being condescending. Satisfied, he pressed send and headed out the door. The offices of Market Fusion occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. As Maxwell stepped off the elevator, his assistant Vanessa was waiting with an anxious expression and a tablet in hand. "Morning, Vanessa," Maxwell greeted her, attempting to project confidence he didn't feel. "Good morning, Mr. Grant. The board members have already started arriving. They're in the conference room having coffee. Mr. Phillips has been asking for the latest projections." James Phillips, the chairman of the board. Of course, he'd be the first to arrive, circling like a vulture. "Thank you, Vanessa. I'll be there in a moment. Could you make sure the presentation is loaded and ready?" As Vanessa hurried off, Maxwell's phone vibrated with a text notification. "Sarah. Good morning. We got home fine. Thank you again for the car. I'm at work until 3 p.m. today, but I can talk after that. Ethan has a doctor's appointment at 4:30 if you'd like to meet us there. Mercy General Pediatric Clinic. No pressure, though." Maxwell found himself smiling at his phone, an unusual occurrence in the company hallway. He quickly typed back, "I'll be there. Text me if anything changes." With that settled, he squared his shoulders and headed toward the conference room. Through the glass walls he could see the board members, 8 men and 2 women, all in expensive suits, all with expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. "Maxwell," James Phillips greeted him with a handshake that was just a bit too firm. "We're eager to hear your plan for turning things around." "Thank you for coming, James. Everyone," Maxwell acknowledged the room with a nod. "Shall we begin?" The next hour was as grueling as Maxwell had anticipated. He presented the company's current financial position honestly, not sugarcoating the declining revenue or the loss of 3 major clients to competitors. The board members' expressions grew increasingly grim. Then, instead of launching into his prepared turnaround plan, the cost-cutting measures and restructuring that now seemed so inadequate, Maxwell took a deep breath and closed his laptop. "What I've shown you is the reality of our situation," he said, looking around the table. "And I could present you with a conventional plan. Layoffs, budget cuts, a rebranding effort. But I don't believe that's what Market Fusion needs right now." The room grew tensely silent. James Phillips leaned forward, brow furrowed. "What exactly are you suggesting, Maxwell?" "I'm suggesting that we've lost sight of what made this company successful in the first place. We've become disconnected from the real people who use our products, from the businesses that rely on our platforms to reach their customers." Maxwell thought of Sarah, of her children, of Jenny's diner. "Our competitors are beating us because they understand something we've forgotten, that behind every click, every data point, every algorithm, there are real people with real needs." "This sounds very philosophical, Maxwell, but what's your actual plan?" asked Diana Chen, one of the board members who had been most vocal about her dissatisfaction. "My plan is to rebuild Market Fusion from the ground up, not with layoffs, but with a complete reorientation of our business model. I want to create a new division focused specifically on small and medium-sized businesses, the kind that can't afford our current pricing structure but would benefit enormously from our technology." The board members exchanged glances. This wasn't at all what they had expected. "That would require significant investment at a time when we're already bleeding money," James pointed out. "Yes, it would," Maxwell agreed. which is why I'm proposing to invest $5 million of my own money to fund this initiative for the first year." A stunned silence fell over the room. Maxwell had their full attention now. "I believe in this company," he continued, "and I believe this approach will not only save Market Fusion but make it stronger than ever. I'm asking for 6 months to prove the concept. If it doesn't work, I'll step down as CEO without a fight." The discussion that followed was heated, with board members raising valid concerns about the risks involved. But Maxwell remained firm, answering their questions with a conviction that surprised even himself. By the end of the meeting, he had secured a tentative agreement, 6 months to implement his new strategy with quarterly reviews of the progress. As the board members filed out, James Phillips lingered behind. "That was quite a performance, Maxwell. I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I, James," Maxwell replied honestly. "So do I." Once alone in his office, Maxwell slumped into his chair, adrenaline still coursing through his system. He had just committed $5 million of his personal fortune to a completely untested business strategy, inspired by a chance encounter with a struggling family in a diner. On paper, it looked like madness, yet he felt more energized, more purposeful than he had in years. He spent the rest of the morning outlining his new vision, calling in his top executives to share the board's decision and set the wheels in motion. By lunch, the office was buzzing with cautious excitement about the new direction. At 3:30 p.m., Maxwell found himself walking through the sliding doors of Mercy General Hospital, navigating his way to the pediatric clinic on the 3rd floor. He had left work early, something he couldn't remember doing in months, if not years. The clinic waiting room was cheerfully decorated with colorful wall murals and a small play area in the corner. Several parents sat with children of various ages, all looking up with mild curiosity as Maxwell entered in his business suit, clearly out of place among the casual attire of the other adults. He spotted Sarah immediately. She was sitting near the play area, watching as Jack and Emma played with the available toys. Lily was beside her, reading a book, while Ethan sat on her lap, looking subdued. Sarah noticed him and raised a hand in greeting, surprise evident in her expression. Perhaps she hadn't really expected him to show up. Maxwell made his way over to them, suddenly feeling uncertain about his presence here. "You came," Sarah said as he approached, her tone somewhere between a statement and a question. "I said I would," Maxwell replied simply, taking the empty seat beside her. "How is everyone today?" "Good," Sarah nodded. "Tired. I just finished my shift at Save Mart, and the kids came straight from their after-school program." "After-school program?" "At the community center. It's subsidized, so it's affordable. Lily and Emma help with Jack and Ethan until I can pick them up after work." Maxwell glanced at Lily, who had looked up from her book to study him with that same protective wariness. "That's a lot of responsibility," he said gently. Lily shrugged. "I don't mind. They're my brothers and sister." Before Maxwell could respond, a nurse appeared at the door. "Ethan Thompson?" Sarah stood, gathering Ethan in her arms. "That's us." "All of you?" the nurse asked, looking dubiously at the size of the group. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "My other children need to come with me." The nurse nodded, though her expression suggested this wasn't ideal. Sarah turned to Maxwell. "You don't have to come in. I know you're busy." "I'd like to if that's all right," Maxwell said. "That's why I'm here." Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right." They followed the nurse through a narrow hallway to an examination room that felt cramped with all 6 of them inside. Sarah sat on the examination table with Ethan, while the other children found spots against the wall. Maxwell stood awkwardly by the door, feeling increasingly out of his depth. Dr. Matthews, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile and efficient manner, entered a few minutes later. She greeted Sarah and the children by name, then raised an eyebrow at Maxwell's presence. "This is a friend," Sarah explained simply. "Maxwell, He's helping with Ethan's medication. The doctor nodded, turning her attention to Ethan. And how's our brave boy doing today? As the examination proceeded, Maxwell observed the interaction with interest. Dr. Matthews was thorough but gentle, explaining everything she was doing to both Sarah and Ethan in clear, simple terms. Sarah asked informed questions, clearly invested in understanding her son's condition and treatment. The preventative inhaler seems to be working well, Dr. Matthews concluded, but I'd like to adjust the dosage slightly since he's been having more nighttime symptoms. She scribbled on a prescription pad. This is the new prescription. It's still the same medication, just a stronger concentration. Sarah took the prescription, a shadow crossing her face as she glanced at it. And this is covered the same way as the previous one? Dr. Matthews hesitated. The copay might be a bit higher because of the concentration change. The pharmacy can give you the exact amount. Maxwell saw Sarah's shoulders tense slightly, though her expression remained neutral. This, he realized, was why she had allowed him to come. The uncertainty of whether she could afford the new medication her son needed. After a few more instructions and a reminder to schedule a follow-up appointment, Dr. Matthews left them to gather their things. Once alone, Sarah turned to Maxwell, clearly struggling with what she was about to ask. The copay for his medication is usually around $75, but with the change in dosage, "It's not a problem," Maxwell assured her quickly. "Whatever it costs, I'm happy to cover it." Relief washed over Sarah's face, quickly followed by a flash of what looked like shame. "I don't usually. This isn't something I know," Maxwell said gently. "You're doing this for Ethan." Sarah nodded, composing herself. "Thank you." As they left the examination room and headed toward the hospital pharmacy, Maxwell felt Lily fall into step beside him. "You're really going to help with Ethan's medicine?" she asked, her voice pitched low so her mother couldn't hear. "Yes, I am," Maxwell confirmed. Lily considered this. Why? It was a fair question, one Maxwell had been asking himself all day. Why was he here, inserting himself into the lives of this family he barely knew? The answer came to him with surprising clarity. "Because I can," he said simply, "and because your family reminds me of what's important." Lily studied him for a long moment, her young face serious beyond her years. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded, not quite approval, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. As they approached the pharmacy counter, Maxwell realized he had spent the entire day thinking about Sarah and her children rather than Market Fusion's problems. Somehow, helping this family felt more urgent, more meaningful than saving his company. Yet strangely, it was his encounter with them that had inspired the very strategy that might save Market Fusion after all. Life had a curious way of connecting dots you never expected to align. At the pharmacy, Maxwell stood slightly apart from Sarah and the children, giving them some privacy while still remaining close enough to step in when needed. Sarah handed over the prescription to the pharmacist, who began typing into her computer. "The copay for this will be $120, the pharmacist announced after a moment, her eyes flickering briefly to the 4 children clustered around their mother. Maxwell saw Sarah's shoulders stiffen. It was more than she had anticipated. He moved forward smoothly before she could respond. "That's fine," he said, pulling out his credit card. "We'll take it." The pharmacist nodded, accepting the card without comment. As she processed the payment, Maxwell noticed Sarah's expression, gratitude mingled with discomfort. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'll pay you back." "There's no need," Maxwell assured her. "This is something I want to do." Sarah looked like she wanted to argue but seemed to think better of it with the children present. The pharmacist returned with the medication and instructions, which Sarah listened to attentively, asking several questions about timing and potential side effects. As they left the pharmacy, Emma tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, I'm hungry." Sarah checked her watch. "We'll be home soon, sweetie. I can make sandwiches." "Actually?" Maxwell found himself saying. I'd like to invite all of you to dinner, if you don't have other plans, that is." Sarah hesitated, clearly torn. "That's very kind, but we don't want to impose any further." "It's not an imposition," Maxwell insisted. "I'd enjoy the company, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not quite ready to go back to my empty apartment." This last admission seemed to sway her. "All right," she agreed, "but somewhere casual. These kids can't handle anywhere fancy." "I know just the place," Maxwell said with a smile. 30 minutes later, they were seated in a family-friendly restaurant not far from the hospital. It wasn't as upscale as Maxwell's usual haunts, but it was several steps above the diner. Clean, cheerful, with a menu varied enough to please everyone. The children's eyes had widened when they entered, suggesting this was a treat for them. "Order whatever you like," Maxwell told them as they studied the menus. "I'm famished myself." Once they had ordered, burgers for Jack and Lily, pasta for Emma, chicken fingers for Ethan, and a salad for Sarah, Maxwell found himself the subject of curious stares from the children. "How did your big meeting go?" Sarah asked, seemingly to break the ice. "The one you were worried about last night." Maxwell was surprised she had remembered. "Actually, it went differently than expected. I proposed a completely new direction for my company." "Is that good or bad?" Jack asked, sipping his chocolate milk through a straw. "I'm not sure yet," Maxwell admitted with a smile. "It's risky, but sometimes risks are necessary." "Like when you have to jump from the high dive even though you're scared," Emma suggested thoughtfully. "Exactly like that," Maxwell agreed, impressed by her analogy. "Did your company get in trouble because of something you did?" Lily asked bluntly. "Lily," Sarah admonished gently. "It's all right," Maxwell assured her. "It's a fair question." He turned to Lily. "In a way, yes. I was so focused on making the company bigger and more profitable that I lost sight of what made it special in the first place. I stopped listening to what our clients actually needed." "So you made a mistake," Lily said, not unkindly. "Several," Maxwell acknowledged, "but I'm hoping to fix them now." Their food arrived, temporarily halting the conversation as the children dove into their meals with enthusiasm. Maxwell watched as Sarah cut Ethan's chicken into smaller pieces, wiped Jack's face with a napkin, and made sure Emma had enough Parmesan for her pasta, all while barely touching her own food. "You should eat," he said quietly. "They're fine for a minute." Sarah gave him a small smile and took a bite of her salad. Force of habit. When you have 4 kids, you get used to putting yourself last. "How did you and your husband meet?" Maxwell asked, genuinely curious about the woman sitting across from him. A shadow crossed Sarah's face, but it was quickly replaced by a warm reminiscence. "College. David was studying engineering and I was in pre-nursing. We met at a campus coffee shop. I spilled my latte all over his textbook." "Not the smoothest first impression," Maxwell commented with a smile. "No, but he was sweet about it. Asked me out that same day, said ruining his fluid dynamics textbook was the best thing that had happened to him all semester." Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "We got married right after graduation, had Lily a year later. Everything was on track until he got sick," Maxwell finished gently when she trailed off. Sarah nodded, absently straightening Ethan's napkin. "Pancreatic cancer is a monster. By the time they diagnosed him, it had already spread. He fought hard for 8 months, but—" She glanced at the children, who were thankfully absorbed in their meals and not listening closely. "The medical bills were substantial. Even with insurance, he couldn't work during treatment and I had to cut back my hours to care for him and the kids." "So you never finished your nursing degree?" Maxwell surmised. "No, I was halfway through the program when David got sick. Now, between work and the kids, finding time for school seems impossible. But I haven't given up on it. Somehow, someday, I'll finish." The determination in her voice was unmistakable, and Maxwell found himself admiring her resilience in the face of such devastating setbacks. "What about you?" Sarah asked. clearly wanting to shift the focus away from herself. "You mentioned you were divorced. No children?" "No," Maxwell admitted. "Caroline, my ex-wife, wanted them. I always said we'd start a family once the company was stable, once we had reached certain financial goals. But there was always another target, another milestone to achieve first." "And she got tired of waiting," Sarah guessed. "She got tired of competing with spreadsheets and board meetings for my attention," Maxwell corrected ruefully. "Can't say I blame her." Their conversation was interrupted by Jack, who had finished his burger and was now eyeing the dessert menu with obvious interest. "Can we have ice cream?" he asked hopefully. "You haven't even finished your dinner," Sarah pointed out. "I did," Jack protested, pointing to his empty plate. "Ice cream sounds good to me," Maxwell said. "I think we've all earned a treat today." When their desserts arrived, sundaes for the children, coffee for the adults, Maxwell found himself the recipient of an unexpected question from Emma. "Do you live all by yourself?" she asked, carefully spooning ice cream into her mouth. "I do," Maxwell nodded. "In an apartment downtown." "Isn't that lonely?" Emma persisted, her 8-year-old perception cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Maxwell blinked, taken aback by the directness of the question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I'm used to it." "We're never alone," Jack chimed in, chocolate sauce smeared across his face. "There's always someone. Sometimes I wish I could be alone." "No, you don't," Lily told him matter-of-factly. "Remember when Mom had to work late and Mrs. Garcia from next door watched us? You cried because you missed everyone." Jack frowned at this betrayal of his tough guy image. "Did not." "Did too," Emma joined in, grinning. As the children bickered good-naturedly, Maxwell caught Sarah watching him with a curious expression. "What?" he asked softly. "Nothing." She shook her head slightly. "It's just, you seem different today than you did last night, more relaxed." Maxwell considered this. "I think I am. Last night I was dreading today's meeting, worried about losing my company. Now," he glanced at the children, now engaged in a debate about the best ice cream flavor. "Now I'm realizing there are more important things in life than quarterly reports." "Like what?" Sarah challenged gently. Maxwell met her gaze. "Like people, connections, making a difference." Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded as if he'd passed some sort of test. "So what happens now with your company?" "We're pivoting," Maxwell explained, his enthusiasm growing as he spoke. "Creating a new division focused on small businesses that can't afford our current products. The board has given me 6 months to prove it can work." "That's a big change," Sarah observed. "What inspired it?" Maxwell hesitated, unsure how to explain that it was his encounter with her and her children that had triggered this epiphany. "Let's just say I had a moment of clarity about what really matters." Before Sarah could respond, Maxwell's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Vanessa, his assistant. "Excuse me, I should take this," he said, stepping away from the table. "Maxwell, I'm sorry to bother you after hours," Vanessa began as soon as he answered. "But James Phillips is looking for you. He wants to discuss the implementation timeline for the new strategy." He seemed concerned. Maxwell sighed. The chairman wasn't wasting any time in monitoring his every move. "Tell him I'll call him first thing tomorrow morning. We'll set up a proper meeting to go through the details." "He was quite insistent," Vanessa pressed. "I'm in the middle of something important right now," Maxwell said firmly. "It will have to wait until tomorrow." After hanging up, Maxwell returned to the table to find Ethan on Sarah's lap, looking drowsy. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Just work," Maxwell assured her. "Nothing that can't wait." "We should probably get going," Sarah said, noting Ethan's drooping eyelids. "It's been a long day and they have school tomorrow." Maxwell nodded, signaling for the check. "Of course. Can I drive you home?" Sarah hesitated. "That's not necessary. We can take the bus." "Please," Maxwell insisted. "It's getting late and Ethan's already half asleep." After a moment's consideration, Sarah relented. "All right, thank you." The drive to Sarah's apartment took them to a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. The buildings were older, showing signs of wear, but the streets were clean and there were small touches, window boxes with flowers, a community garden in a vacant lot that spoke of residents who cared about their surroundings. Sarah's building was a 3-story walk-up with a faded brick facade. As Maxwell pulled up in front, he noticed Lily watching him carefully, gauging his reaction to their home. "Thank you for dinner," Sarah said as the children unbuckled their seatbelts. "And for Ethan's medication. It means more than you know." "I was happy to help," Maxwell replied sincerely. "Would it be all right if I checked in again soon? Maybe this weekend?" Sarah looked surprised, then uncertain. "You don't have to do that. You've already been very generous." "It's not about obligation," Maxwell assured her. "I've enjoyed spending time with all of you." Sarah studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decipher his true intentions. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, this weekend would be fine. I'm off on Saturday." "Saturday it is," Maxwell confirmed, trying not to appear too eager. As the family climbed out of the car, Ethan now fully asleep in Sarah's arms, Lily hung back for a moment. She approached Maxwell's window, her expression serious. "My mom's been through a lot," she said quietly. "We all have. Don't make promises you won't keep." Before Maxwell could respond, she turned and hurried after her family, leaving him with the weight of her words. He watched as they entered the building, Sarah balancing Ethan while herding the other children inside. Only when they had disappeared from view did Maxwell pull away from the curb, his mind buzzing with conflicting emotions. Lily's warning had been clear. Don't toy with this family's hopes. Don't be another disappointment in lives that had already seen too many. As he drove back to his luxurious but empty penthouse, Maxwell realized that for the first time in years, he was looking forward to the weekend more than he was dreading the workday ahead. Despite the challenges facing Market Fusion, despite James Phillips's skepticism, despite the enormity of the changes he had proposed, he felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for too long. And it had nothing to do with business strategies or profit margins. It had everything to do with a brave single mother, 4 remarkable children, and the possibility that by helping them, he might find the path to helping himself. Maxwell parked in his assigned spot in the building's underground garage and rode the elevator to the penthouse level, the silence of the ascending car a stark contrast to the lively chatter of Sarah's children. Opening the door to his apartment, he was struck by the emptiness that awaited him. Sleek furniture, expensive art, panoramic views, but no warmth, no life. Emma's innocent question echoed in his mind. "Isn't that lonely?" "Yes," he admitted to himself as he poured a glass of water instead of his usual evening scotch. "Yes, it is. But perhaps it didn't have to be that way forever." The next few days passed in a blur of activity for Maxwell. True to his word, James Phillips had demanded a detailed implementation plan for the new strategy, and Maxwell found himself in marathon meetings with his executive team, hammering out the specifics of what they were now calling the Community Initiative. "The name's not quite right," remarked Diane Wu, Market Fusion's chief marketing officer, during Thursday's strategy session. "It sounds like a charity, not a business division." "What about Local Fusion?" suggested Brian Torres, the company's lead product developer. "It captures the local business focus while maintaining connection to our brand." Maxwell nodded approvingly. "I like it. Local Fusion it is." As the week progressed, Maxwell found himself energized in a way he hadn't been in years. The initial skepticism from his team was giving way to cautious enthusiasm as the vision took shape. They were designing a streamlined, affordable version of their platform specifically tailored to the needs of small businesses, shops, restaurants, local service providers who couldn't afford enterprise-level marketing solutions but desperately needed digital tools to remain competitive. We'll need to completely rethink our pricing structure, noted Anna Kapoor, the CFO, her expression concerned as she reviewed the preliminary numbers. The margins will be much thinner than what we're used to. But the volume could be exponentially higher, Maxwell countered. There are millions of small businesses out there struggling to establish an online presence. If we can capture even a fraction of that market. Throughout these discussions, Maxwell found himself thinking of Jenny's diner, of the small businesses in Sarah's neighborhood, the florist with the window boxes, the community garden that might benefit from better local visibility. These were the places that formed the backbone of communities, yet were increasingly squeezed by larger competitors with sophisticated digital marketing capabilities. In between meetings, Maxwell found himself texting Sarah occasionally. Nothing intrusive, just checking in on Ethan's health, confirming their Saturday plans, sharing a funny anecdote from his day. Her responses were friendly but reserved, sometimes taking hours to arrive, which he understood given her hectic schedule. On Friday evening, after most of the office had emptied, Maxwell sat alone in his office, putting the finishing touches on a presentation about local fusion for a potential investor. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Just confirming we're still on for tomorrow. Kids are excited, especially Emma, who has about 100 questions prepared for you about running a business." Maxwell smiled, typing back, "Absolutely still on. Looking forward to it, and I'll do my best to answer all 100 questions." After sending the text, he leaned back in his chair, reflecting on how much had changed in less than a week. The board meeting that he had dreaded now seemed like a distant memory, a turning point that had set him on this new path. His company still faced significant challenges, but for the first time in years he felt hopeful about its future, and his own. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Maxwell had suggested taking the children to the city's science museum, which was featuring a special exhibition on robotics that he thought might interest them. Sarah had agreed, admitting that although the museum was on their someday list, the admission fees had always been prohibitive. Maxwell arrived at Sarah's building precisely at the agreed time of 10:01 a.m., parking his luxury SUV in a spot that looked significantly out of place in the modest neighborhood. As he approached the entrance, he noticed a small playground adjacent to the building where several children were playing under the watchful eyes of parents seated on nearby benches. He pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B and waited, suddenly feeling nervous. What if the children didn't enjoy the outing he had planned? What if Sarah regretted agreeing to spend the day with him? His worries were interrupted by the building's security door buzzing open. Inside the small lobby, he found all 5 Thompsons waiting for him. The children were dressed in what were clearly their best clothes: Lily in jeans and a purple sweater, Emma in a floral dress over leggings, Jack in khakis and a button-down shirt that looked slightly too large, and Ethan in a miniature version of Jack's outfit. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Maxwell hadn't seen before, her hair loose around her shoulders rather than in the practical ponytail she'd worn at the diner and hospital. "You all look very nice," Maxwell said, suddenly conscious of his own casual attire, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Sarah's entire outfit. "Mom made us dress up," Jack informed him matter-of-factly. "I wanted to wear my Spider-Man shirt." "Special occasions call for special clothes," Sarah explained with a slight flush. "We don't get to go to the Science Museum every day." "Well, I'm honored," Maxwell replied, meaning it. The effort they had made touched something deep within him. The drive to the museum was filled with excited chatter from the back seats. Emma, true to Sarah's warning, peppered Maxwell with questions about his company, while Jack speculated loudly about the robots they might see. Lily remained quieter, though Maxwell caught her watching him in the rearview mirror several times, her expression thoughtful rather than suspicious. At the museum, Maxwell insisted on purchasing the enhanced admission package that included the robotics exhibition, the planetarium show, and the interactive science lab. Sarah started to protest at the expense, but Maxwell gently reminded her that this outing was his treat entirely. "You can get the next one," he joked, immediately wondering if there would be a next one or if this was a one-time excursion. Inside, the children's excitement was palpable. Even Lily's reserve melted away as they explored the exhibits, her eyes widening at the robotics demonstration where visitors could program simple commands for a mechanical arm. "This is so cool," she breathed, carefully inputting instructions that made the robot pick up a small cube and place it on a platform. "We learned about programming in school, but we don't have equipment like this." Maxwell watched as Sarah moved from exhibit to exhibit with the children, her expression just as wonder-filled as theirs. She stopped to read every informational plaque, occasionally kneeling to explain complex concepts to Jack and Ethan in simpler terms. Her knowledge impressed him. Clearly, her nursing studies had given her a solid foundation in science. "Mom's the smartest person ever," Emma informed Maxwell seriously as they watched Sarah helping Jack create a circuit at one of the interactive stations. "She helps us with all our homework, even the really hard stuff." "I believe it," Maxwell replied, watching Sarah's patient guidance. "She's pretty amazing." Emma studied him with a perceptiveness that seemed beyond her 8 years. "You like her, don't you?" Maxwell felt heat rise to his face. "I like all of you," he answered carefully. Emma rolled her eyes in a distinctly pre-teen manner. "That's not what I meant." Before Maxwell could formulate a response to this unexpectedly direct question, Ethan tugged at his hand. "Can we see the dinosaurs now, please?" Grateful for the interruption, Maxwell allowed himself to be led toward the paleontology wing, though Emma's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled by his evasion. The morning passed quickly as they explored the museum's many exhibits. By lunchtime, even energetic Jack was showing signs of fatigue, and Ethan had asked to be carried, his small legs tired from the morning's adventures. "There's a cafe on the top floor with a nice view of the city," Maxwell suggested, noticing that Sarah was looking a bit worn out herself, though she was trying not to show it. The cafe was crowded with other families, but Maxwell managed to secure a table near the windows. As they settled in with their trays of food, he noticed Sarah digging through her purse. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "Ethan's medication," she explained. "He needs to take it with lunch. It must be in the other compartment." Her search became more frantic as she emptied the contents of her purse onto the table. "I can't believe this," she muttered, a note of panic entering her voice. "I always bring it. Always." "Is it an emergency?" Maxwell asked, concerned by her growing distress. "Not yet, but he needs to take it regularly to prevent asthma attacks," Sarah explained, now checking the small backpack she had brought with essentials for the day. "It's not in here either. I must have left it on the counter when I was rushing everyone out the door." "We could go back and get it," Maxwell suggested. Sarah checked her watch. "It's a 30-minute drive each way. By the time we got back, we'd have missed the planetarium show at 2 Oaks. The kids have been talking about it all week." "We could split up," Maxwell offered. "I could take you back to get the medication while the children stay here with—" He stopped, realizing the flaw in his plan. Who would watch the children? "It's fine," Sarah said, though her expression was still worried. "He took his morning dose. He should be okay until we get home. We'll just need to be careful." Throughout lunch, Maxwell noticed Sarah keeping a close eye on Ethan, who seemed unaware of the situation as he happily munched on his chicken nuggets. When the boy coughed once, Sarah tensed, only relaxing when it was clear it was just from a sip of juice going down the wrong way. After lunch, they made their way to the planetarium for the afternoon show. As they waited in line, Lily approached Maxwell while Sarah was occupied helping Jack with a stuck zipper on his jacket. "Mom's worried about Ethan," she said quietly. "She always has his medicine." "I offered to take her back to get it," Maxwell replied. Lily nodded. "I know, I heard. But Mom wouldn't want to ruin the day." She hesitated, then added, "Dad used to carry a spare inhaler for emergencies. After he died, Mom started carrying too. She never forgets." Maxwell absorbed this information, understanding its significance. The fact that Sarah had forgotten the medication spoke volumes about her exhaustion level. How many hours had she worked this week? How much sleep had she gotten? As they filed into the darkened planetarium, Maxwell found himself seated between Emma and Sarah, with Ethan on Sarah's other side. As the lights dimmed and the celestial display began above them, Maxwell was acutely aware of Sarah beside him, her profile illuminated by the starlight projected on the domed ceiling. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her face upturned to the cosmic display. "I've always loved astronomy." "Me too," Maxwell replied softly. For the next 45 minutes, they journeyed through the solar system and beyond, the narrator's soothing voice explaining distant galaxies and stellar phenomena. Maxwell found himself watching Sarah and the children almost as much as the show itself, captivated by their expressions of wonder. As they exited the planetarium, Ethan began coughing, a dry, persistent cough that immediately drew Sarah's attention. She knelt beside him, rubbing his back. "Are you okay, buddy?" she asked, her voice calm despite the concern evident in her eyes. Ethan nodded, but the coughing continued. Sarah looked up at Maxwell, worry now plainly visible. "I think we should head home." "Of course," Maxwell agreed immediately. "Let's go." As they made their way toward the exit, Ethan's coughing worsened, and his breathing became audibly labored. By the time they reached Maxwell's car, the boy's face had taken on a frightening bluish tinge, and he was struggling to draw breath. "He's having an attack," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear as she strapped Ethan into his car seat. "We need to get him home to his medication now." Maxwell drove as quickly as was safely possible, hyper-aware of the precious cargo in his vehicle. In the back seat, Sarah was speaking soothingly to Ethan, coaching him through breathing techniques while the other children watched with wide, frightened eyes. "Is there a pharmacy on the way?" Maxwell asked, an idea forming. "Could they give us an emergency inhaler?" "They'd need a prescription," Sarah explained, her voice strained. "Just get us home as fast as you can." Maxwell navigated through the weekend traffic with focused determination, taking every shortcut he knew to reach Sarah's neighborhood. When they finally pulled up in front of her building, Sarah quickly unbuckled Ethan and lifted him into her arms. "Lily, take the keys and unlock the door," she instructed, handing her purse to her eldest daughter. "The rest of you stay with Maxwell until I call you up." Without waiting for a response, Sarah rushed toward the building with Ethan, Lily hurrying ahead with the keys. Maxwell watched them disappear inside, his heart pounding with worry. In the back seat, Emma and Jack sat silently, their earlier excitement replaced by fear for their brother. "Is Ethan going to be okay?" Jack asked in a small voice. "Yes," Maxwell assured him, with more confidence than he felt. "Your mom knows exactly what to do. He'll be fine once he gets his medicine." The minutes ticked by slowly. Maxwell tried to distract the children with questions about their favorite parts of the museum, but their responses were subdued, their eyes frequently darting to the building entrance. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity but was probably only 15 minutes, Lily appeared at the door, waving for them to come up. Maxwell helped the children out of the car and escorted them to the building. Sarah's apartment was on the 3rd floor, a walk-up with no elevator. The space was small but immaculately clean, with furniture that showed signs of wear but had been well maintained. Family photos lined the walls, and children's artwork was proudly displayed on the refrigerator. It was, Maxwell thought, everything a home should be. Modest, perhaps, but filled with love. In the small living room, Sarah sat on the couch with Ethan cradled against her chest. His breathing had improved, though he still looked pale and exhausted. The nebulizer mask that had delivered his medication lay on the coffee table. "He's doing better," Sarah said as they entered, her voice betraying her exhaustion. "The attack wasn't too severe, thankfully." "I'm so glad," Maxwell said, genuine relief washing over him. "Is there anything I can do?" Sarah shook her head. "You've done more than enough. I'm sorry our day got cut short." "Don't apologize," Maxwell insisted. "Ethan's health is what matters." As the immediate crisis passed, the reality of their surroundings seemed to register with Sarah. Maxwell could see her taking in the apartment through his eyes. The cramped space, the worn furniture, the walls that needed fresh paint. "It's not much," she said quietly, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. "It's a wonderful home," Maxwell replied sincerely. And it was. Despite its modest appearance, the apartment radiated warmth in a way his luxury penthouse never had. As Ethan dozed in his mother's arms, the other children gradually relaxed, returning to their normal behavior. Jack brought out his toy cars to show Maxwell while Emma retrieved a book she wanted to discuss. Lily disappeared into the kitchen, returning a few minutes later with a tray of juice and cookies for everyone. "You don't have to entertain me," Maxwell told Sarah as the children busied themselves. "If you need to rest, or if you'd prefer I leave—" "No," Sarah said, surprising him. "Please stay, at least for a little while. The kids were so looking forward to today. I hate that it ended like this." "It hasn't ended," Maxwell pointed out. "We're all still together, aren't we?" Sarah smiled, the tension in her face easing slightly. "Yes, we are." As the afternoon progressed, Ethan recovered enough to join Jack on the floor with the toy cars, though he remained quieter than usual. Maxwell found himself drawn into the family's natural rhythm, helping Emma with a science question, admiring Jack's car collection, even assisting Lily when she decided to prepare sandwiches for everyone. By the time evening approached, Maxwell realized he had spent the entire day with the Thompson family and wasn't the least bit eager to leave. The stark contrast between the warm chaos of this small apartment and the sterile silence of his penthouse was never more apparent. "I should probably go," he said reluctantly as Ethan yawned widely, signaling bedtime was approaching. "Thank you for today. Despite the scare with Ethan, I had a wonderful time." "So did we," Sarah assured him, walking him to the door. "Thank you for the museum. The kids will be talking about it for weeks." In the hallway, away from the children's ears, Maxwell turned to her. "I meant what I said earlier. Your home is wonderful, Sarah. You've created something special here." Sarah's eyes glistened slightly. "Thank you for saying that, and for not judging all of this." She gestured vaguely at their surroundings. "There's nothing to judge," Maxwell said gently, "except maybe my own priorities, which I'm starting to think have been completely backward for years." Sarah studied him for a moment, as if seeing him in a new light. "You're not what I expected, Maxwell Grant. Is that a good thing?" he asked, half smiling. "I'm still deciding," she replied, but her smile suggested she was leaning toward yes. As Maxwell drove home, the events of the day replayed in his mind. The joy at the museum, the fear during Ethan's asthma attack, the comfortable domesticity of the evening in Sarah's apartment. Something was shifting inside him, a realignment of values that had begun the night he walked into Jenny's diner and saw a family huddled in the rain. His phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. It was James Phillips. "Maxwell, we need to talk about the investor presentation for Monday. I've been reviewing the projections for local fusion and I have concerns." "Can it wait until tomorrow, James? I've had a long day." "This is important, Maxwell. The entire board is nervous about this pivot. We need solid numbers, not just feel-good stories about helping small businesses." Maxwell sighed. "I'll have the revised projections to you by noon tomorrow. But James, this isn't just about numbers. It's about people. Real people whose lives can be improved by what we're doing." "That's all well and good," James replied dismissively. "But at the end of the day, we answer to shareholders, not charity cases." The phrase charity cases struck Maxwell like a physical blow, images of Sarah and her children flashing through his mind. "They're not charity cases, James. They're the reason businesses like ours exist in the first place. I'll talk to you tomorrow." He ended the call before James could respond, a new resolve settling over him. Market fusion and local fusion would succeed, not despite its focus on real people and their needs, but because of it. And somewhere along the way, Maxwell was beginning to suspect he might just find the meaning that had been missing from his own life for far too long. Monday morning arrived with a sense of determined purpose for Maxwell. He had spent much of Sunday revising the projections for the local fusion initiative, incorporating more concrete data to address James Phillips's concerns while maintaining the core vision that had inspired him in the first place. As he walked through the market fusion offices, Maxwell noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Where once there had been a tense, competitive energy, now there was a cautious optimism, a sense of shared mission that had been missing for too long. Staff members who typically kept their heads down as he passed now offered greetings and small smiles. The team's responding well to the new direction, Vanessa observed as she handed him his schedule for the day. Brian told me they worked all weekend on the local fusion prototype. They're excited to show you. Schedule time for that this afternoon, Maxwell instructed, genuinely pleased by the news. And Vanessa, could you set up a meeting with Dr. Elaine Chen at Mercy General Hospital sometime this week? Vanessa raised an eyebrow but nodded. May I ask what this is regarding? I want to discuss possible scholarship opportunities for nursing assistants looking to complete their degrees, Maxwell explained. It's a personal project I'm exploring. If Vanessa was curious about this unexpected request, she kept it professional. I'll arrange it. The investor presentation is at 11 size. James Phillips asked if you could meet him beforehand to review the numbers one more time. Tell him I'll see him at 10:30, Maxwell agreed, heading into his office to prepare. The investor presentation went better than Maxwell had dared hope. Victor Patel, a venture capitalist known for backing socially responsible tech initiatives, had been skeptical at first but grew increasingly enthusiastic as Maxwell outlined the vision for local fusion. The small business market is vastly underserved, Victor noted, nodding approvingly. They can't afford enterprise solutions but desperately need digital tools to compete in today's marketplace, and there are millions of them. Exactly, Maxwell agreed. We've been focused on landing whales when there's an ocean of smaller fish who, collectively, represent a massive opportunity. James Phillips, seated at the end of the conference table, remained tight-lipped throughout the presentation. Only when Victor began discussing specific investment terms did he engage, pushing for more favorable conditions with a tenacity that reminded Maxwell why he was valuable as chairman, despite their differences in vision. After the meeting concluded with a tentative agreement for a substantial investment, James cornered Maxwell in the hallway. You were convincing in there, he acknowledged grudgingly. Patel seems on board. The numbers speak for themselves, Maxwell replied. This isn't just idealism, James. It's sound business strategy. Perhaps, James conceded, but I still don't understand what's prompted this sudden shift in your priorities. For years, you've been ruthlessly focused on high-margin enterprise clients. Now you're talking about mom-and-pop shops like they're the holy grail. Maxwell considered his response carefully. Let's just say I've had a perspective adjustment. Sometimes you need to step outside your bubble to see opportunities you've been missing. James studied him with narrow eyes. This wouldn't have anything to do with that family you were seen with at the Science Museum on Saturday, would it? Maxwell stiffened. You're having me followed? Don't be dramatic, James scoffed. My grandson was there with his parents. He pointed you out with a woman and several children. Seemed rather cozy. My personal life is none of your concern, Maxwell said coldly. It is when it affects company strategy, James retorted. Look, Maxwell, I've known you for years. You've always been focused, disciplined, not swayed by emotional considerations. Now suddenly you're championing small businesses and setting up meetings with hospitals. It raises questions. The only question that should matter to you is whether this strategy will benefit market fusion, Maxwell replied evenly. And based on Victor's response today, I think we both know the answer to that. Before James could respond, Maxwell's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced down to see Sarah's name on the screen. "If you'll excuse me, I have another meeting," Maxwell said, turning away from James. Once in his office with the door closed, Maxwell checked Sarah's message. "Ethan's feeling much better today. The kids haven't stopped talking about the museum. Thank you again for everything." A smile spread across Maxwell's face as he typed his response. "Glad to hear Ethan's better. I had a wonderful time too. Would love to see all of you again soon." The reply came almost immediately. "Jack has a baseball game this Thursday at 5 us if you're interested. Very low stakes. Kindergartners mostly just running in the wrong direction, but he'd be thrilled if you came." Maxwell checked his calendar. He had a dinner scheduled with potential clients, something he would normally consider unmissable. Without hesitation, he typed back, "I wouldn't miss it. Send me the location." As he set his phone down, Maxwell was startled by a knock at his door. It was Caroline, his ex-wife. "Caroline," he said, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" She looked as elegant as ever in a tailored suit, her blonde hair cut in a stylish bob that was shorter than when he'd last seen her. "Hello, Maxwell. Vanessa said you weren't in a meeting." "I'm not," he confirmed, gesturing for her to take a seat. "It's been, what, a year?" 14 months, she corrected, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I was in the building for a meeting with Artemis Tech on the 12th floor. Thought I'd stop by and say hello." There was an awkward pause as they regarded each other, once intimately connected and now virtual strangers. "You look well," Maxwell offered finally. "So do you," Caroline replied, studying him. "Different somehow, less tense." Maxwell smiled slightly. "I'm working on that." "I heard about the new direction for market fusion," Caroline said. "Local fusion, is it? Quite a departure from your usual approach." "News travels fast," Maxwell observed. "It's a small industry," she shrugged. "People talk, especially when someone like you makes an unexpected move." "And what do they say?" Maxwell asked, curious despite himself. "Some think you've lost your edge," Caroline said bluntly. "Others think it's brilliant. I was curious which it was." "And now that you're here?" Caroline tilted her head, considering him. "Now I think neither. I think something's changed for you personally, and the business strategy is a reflection of that." Maxwell had forgotten how perceptive she could be. It was one of the qualities that had attracted him to her in the first place. "You might be right," he acknowledged. "Is there someone new in your life?" she asked directly. Maxwell hesitated. "It's complicated." Caroline laughed softly. "It always is with you, Maxwell." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Well, I should go. It was good to see you." "You too, Caroline," Maxwell replied, rising as well. At the door, she paused. "Whatever, or whoever, is behind this change, hold on to it. You seem happier than I've seen you in years." After she left, Maxwell sat at his desk, reflecting on her observation. Was he happier? The past week had been a whirlwind of new experiences and emotions, challenging but invigorating. Despite the stress of pivoting his company and the worry over Ethan's health scare, he did feel more alive. His thoughts were interrupted by Vanessa announcing that the product team was ready to show him the local fusion prototype. Maxwell spent the next 2 hours immersed in technical discussions, offering feedback and suggestions as Brian Torres demonstrated the streamlined platform designed for small business owners with limited technical expertise. "We've simplified the interface but maintained core functionality," Brian explained, clicking through the demo. "A restaurant owner or a local shop manager could set this up in under an hour, even with no previous experience." "It's excellent work," Maxwell praised, genuinely impressed. "How quickly can we get a beta version ready for testing?" 2 weeks, Brian replied confidently. "We've already identified a few local businesses willing to be our guinea pigs." "Perfect," Maxwell nodded. "I might have another suggestion to add to the list." Later that evening, after most of the staff had left for the day, Maxwell made a detour on his way home. The neon Jenny's sign glowed warmly in the twilight as he parked his car and entered the diner. The same waitress, Maggie, was behind the counter. She looked up in surprise as Maxwell approached. "Well, look who's back," she said with a friendly smile. "Jenny, that CEO fella is here again." Jenny emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Twice in 1 week. To what do we owe the pleasure?" "I have a business proposition for you," Maxwell said, taking a seat at the counter. "How would you like to help test a new digital marketing platform designed specifically for small businesses like yours? Free of charge, of course." Jenny's eyebrows rose. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Maxwell assured her. "We're developing a new product and need real businesses to test it and provide feedback. Your diner would be perfect." Jenny studied him suspiciously. "This have anything to do with Sarah and her kids?" "Not directly," Maxwell answered honestly. "But meeting them did help me realize that businesses like yours deserve better tools than what's currently available to you." Jenny considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'm listening, but I'm not promising anything." As Maxwell explained the concept of local fusion to Jenny, he was struck by how much more fulfilling this conversation felt compared to countless high-stakes negotiations with corporate clients. Here was a real person with a real business that meant something to the community, the exact kind of client he had overlooked for years. By the time he left the diner with Jenny's tentative agreement to participate in the beta test, Maxwell felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. He had taken the first concrete step toward bridging his professional world with the new perspective he had gained through Sarah and her family. Thursday arrived with perfect baseball weather, clear skies, mild temperature, and a gentle breeze. Maxwell left the office early, changing from his business suit into more casual clothes in his car before driving to the community park where Jack's game was scheduled. The baseball diamond was a modest affair with aluminum bleachers and a chain-link backstop. Parents were setting up folding chairs along the baselines, many arriving directly from work still dressed in their professional attire or uniforms from various jobs. Maxwell spotted Sarah easily. She was setting up chairs for the family wearing scrubs, clearly having come straight from her hospital shift. Lily was helping organize their gear while Emma appeared to be reading a book. Ethan was running in small circles, his energy apparently fully restored after the weekend's scare. Jack, dressed in a too-large team uniform with tigers emblazoned across the chest, was warming up with other kindergartners, which mostly involved throwing balls in random directions and occasionally chasing after them. "Maxwell, you came!" Jack shouted when he spotted him, abandoning his warm-up to race over. "I promised I would," Maxwell replied, surprised by the enthusiastic greeting. "I wouldn't miss your big game." Sarah looked up at Jack's exclamation, a smile spreading across her face as she saw Maxwell approaching. "You made it?" "Of course," he said, suddenly feeling awkward. "I brought chairs for everyone." He held up the high-end folding chairs he had purchased specifically for the occasion. "You didn't have to do that," Sarah began, but Lily interrupted. "Those look way more comfortable than ours," she observed practically. "And Ethan always complains his legs hurt in our old chairs." And just like that, the tension broke. Maxwell set up the chairs alongside Sarah's, creating a family-sized seating area for all of them. Emma marked her place in her book and moved to sit beside him, immediately launching into a detailed explanation of baseball rules that she had memorized for the occasion. "The game is only 3 innings," she informed him seriously, "and everybody gets to bat, even if they strike out, which happens a lot." "Sounds like my kind of baseball," Maxwell replied with a grin. As the game began, Maxwell found himself fully invested in the chaotic spectacle of 5- and 6-year-olds attempting organized sports. Jack's turn at bat was a highlight. After several wild swings, he made contact with the ball and stood frozen in shock until every adult on the sidelines yelled for him to run. His expression of pure joy as he reached first base safely was priceless. Beside Maxwell, Sarah alternated between cheering enthusiastically and covering her eyes during particularly suspenseful moments. When their shoulders occasionally brushed, neither moved away. During a break between innings, as Jack's team took the field, Emma turned to Maxwell with her characteristic directness. "Are you going to be around a lot now?" The question caught him off guard. I hope so, if that's okay with all of you." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "It's okay with me. Jack thinks you're cool because you know about robots. Ethan likes that you let him sit on your shoulders at the museum. And Lily doesn't glare at you anymore, which means she likes you." "Emma," Sarah admonished gently, her cheeks flushing, "that's enough." "What about you?" Maxwell asked Emma, curious despite Sarah's embarrassment. "What do you think?" Emma considered the question with endearing seriousness. "I think you make Mom smile more, and you don't treat us like we're charity cases, so that's good." Maxwell met Sarah's eyes over Emma's head, finding both apology and something warmer in her gaze. "I think that's very good," he agreed softly. As the game resumed, with Jack's team trailing by an indeterminate number of runs, the scorekeeping had become rather creative, Maxwell felt a small hand slip into his. Ethan had climbed onto the chair beside him and was now holding his hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world, his eyes fixed on his brother in the outfield. The simple gesture of trust from the youngest Thompson hit Maxwell with unexpected force. Glancing around at this makeshift family unit, Sarah cheering enthusiastically, Lily keeping score in a notebook with extreme precision, Emma explaining the finer points of kindergarten baseball, Ethan's small hand in his own, Maxwell realized with perfect clarity that there was nowhere else in the world he would rather be at that moment. For a man who had spent years chasing success, wealth, and status, it was a profound revelation. Happiness could be found in the simplest of moments, with people who expected nothing from him except his presence and care. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the baseball diamond as Jack's team celebrated their victory. The adults had wisely declared the game a tie, and Maxwell knew with absolute certainty that his life had changed irrevocably, and for the better. In the weeks that followed Jack's baseball game, Maxwell found himself settling into a new rhythm. Weekdays were dedicated to building local fusion, with evenings and weekends increasingly spent in the company of Sarah and her children. What had begun as a chance encounter had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated, a genuine connection that was growing deeper by the day. The beta version of Local Fusion launched with 12 local businesses, including Jenny's Diner. Maxwell himself had spent an evening helping Jenny set up her digital profile, explaining the features in plain language as she asked astute questions about how it would actually bring in more customers. "So people searching for home cooking or best pie in town might find me?" she had asked skeptically. "Exactly," Maxwell had confirmed. "Plus, it will help you communicate with regular customers about specials, events, or changes in hours." 2 weeks into the beta test, Jenny had grudgingly admitted that she'd seen an uptick in new customers, particularly younger people who had discovered the diner through online searches. At the office, the energy continued to shift as more employees embraced the new direction. Even James Phillips had begun to soften his stance as preliminary data from the beta test showed promising results. The market research team had identified thousands of potential small business clients within a 50-mile radius alone, and the sales department was developing a streamlined approach to reach them efficiently. "You were right," Anna Kapoor admitted during an executive meeting. "The volume potential is significant. If even a fraction of these businesses sign up at our proposed price point, Local Fusion could exceed our enterprise division's revenue within 2 years." Maxwell welcomed the professional validation but increasingly found that his thoughts during the workday drifted to Sarah and her children. He found himself checking his phone for messages from Sarah, smiling when a text arrived with a photo of something one of the kids had accomplished or a simple update on their day. On a rainy Tuesday evening, Maxwell was working late at his office when his phone rang. Seeing Sarah's name on the screen, he answered immediately. "Hey," he greeted warmly. "How are you?" "Exhausted," Sarah admitted, her voice betraying her fatigue. "I'm picking up an extra shift at the hospital tonight. One of the other nursing assistants called in sick, and we're already short-staffed." "What about the kids?" Maxwell asked, concerned. "That's actually why I'm calling," Sarah said hesitantly. "My regular babysitter has the flu and my backup isn't answering. I hate to ask, but I'll be there in 20 minutes, Maxwell said without hesitation, already closing his laptop. "Are you sure? I know it's a lot to ask." "Sarah," Maxwell interrupted gently, "I'm happy to help. Besides, it'll be fun." The relief in her voice was palpable. "Thank you. I owe you one." "You don't owe me anything," Maxwell assured her. "Text me anything I need to know about bedtime routines or homework." By the time Maxwell arrived at Sarah's apartment, she was already dressed in her hospital scrubs, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The children were in various states of evening activity, Lily doing homework at the kitchen table, Emma reading on the couch, Jack playing with cars on the floor, and Ethan building a precarious tower of blocks. "You're a lifesaver," Sarah said as she let him in, gathering her things. "Bedtime is 8:30 for the little ones, 9 for the girls. Ethan needs his medication before bed. It's on the kitchen counter with instructions. Emergency numbers are on the fridge." She paused, suddenly looking uncertain. "Are you sure about this? 4 kids is a lot to handle." "We'll be fine," Maxwell assured her, touched by her trust in him. "What time will you be home?" "Around 2 a.m., Sarah sighed. "I'll try not to wake you when I get in. You can take my bed. I'll crash on the couch when I get home." "Absolutely not," Maxwell protested. "I'm perfectly comfortable on the couch. You'll need proper rest after your shift." Before Sarah could argue, Ethan spotted Maxwell and came running over. "Max, look at my tower, it's taller than me." Maxwell crouched down to admire the tower, effectively ending the discussion about sleeping arrangements. Sarah seized the opportunity to say goodbye to the other children, giving each a hug and a reminder to behave. At the door, she turned to Maxwell. "Thank you again. This means more than you know." "Go save lives," Maxwell replied with a smile. "We've got everything under control here." As the door closed behind Sarah, Maxwell turned to face his 4 young charges, all watching him with varying expressions, from Ethan's excitement to Lily's careful assessment. "So," Maxwell said brightly, "what's the usual Tuesday night routine around here?" What followed was one of the most challenging and rewarding evenings of Maxwell's life. He helped Jack with his kindergarten homework, listened to Emma read aloud from her science book, supervised Ethan's bath, which resulted in more water on the bathroom floor than seemed physically possible, and learned from Lily the intricate details of organizing school lunches for the next day. By the time all 4 children were bathed, in pajamas and ready for bed, Maxwell had developed a profound respect for Sarah's daily juggling act. Putting Ethan to bed proved particularly challenging. The 3-year-old was full of questions about why Maxwell was staying over and whether he would still be there in the morning. "Will you read me a story?" Ethan asked as Maxwell tucked him in, his small arms clutching a well-worn teddy bear. "Of course," Maxwell agreed, settling beside the small bed. "Which one would you like?" "Daddy used to read The Brave Little Engine," Ethan said, pointing to a book on the shelf. Maxwell felt a pang as he reached for the book, acutely aware that he was occupying a space that had once belonged to another man, a father these children had lost too soon. He read the story with as much animation as he could muster, relieved when Ethan's eyelids began to droop halfway through. After checking that Jack was also asleep in the bunk above Ethan, Maxwell quietly left the boys' room. In the living room, he found Lily and Emma still awake, though in pajamas. "They went down easier than usual," Lily observed, her tone suggesting she was impressed despite herself. "Usually, Ethan asks for water 3 times and tries to negotiate for a later bedtime. I think I just wore him out with all my inefficiency," Maxwell admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "It took me 20 minutes just to find the right pajamas." "You did okay," Lily assured him, which from her felt like high praise. "Can we watch a show before our bedtime?" Emma asked hopefully. "Mom usually lets us watch one episode of something if our homework is done." Maxwell agreed, and the three of them settled on the couch to watch an educational show about marine life. Maxwell was struck by how comfortable it felt, sitting between these two remarkable girls, answering Emma's occasional questions about whether he'd ever seen a real octopus and noticing how Lily, despite her usual vigilance, eventually relaxed enough to lean slightly against his arm. After the girls had finally gone to bed, Maxwell surveyed the apartment. There were toys to be picked up, dishes in the sink from dinner, and wet towels in the bathroom. Without hesitation, he set about tidying up, wanting Sarah to come home to a clean space after her long shift. As he worked, Maxwell found himself examining the family photos that lined the walls and shelves. Sarah and the children at various ages, many including a tall, smiling man with Jack's dimples and Lily's serious eyes, David Thompson. In one photo, David held a newborn Ethan while Sarah leaned against his shoulder, her face radiant despite her obvious exhaustion. They had been a family, complete and happy, before tragedy struck. The magnitude of what Sarah had lost and what the children had lost hit Maxwell with renewed force. Who was he to step into their lives? What could he possibly offer that would make up for such a profound absence? Maxwell was still pondering these questions when he heard a key in the lock just after 2 a.m. Sarah entered quietly, looking bone-tired but surprised to find him still awake. "You didn't have to wait up," she whispered, setting down her bag. "I wanted to," Maxwell replied simply. "How was your shift?" "Busy," Sarah sighed, sinking onto the couch beside him. "Thank you for tidying up. You didn't have to do that." "It was no trouble," Maxwell assured her. "The kids were great, though I have newfound appreciation for what you do every day. I'm exhausted after just one evening." Sarah smiled wryly. "Welcome to parenthood." The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to address. After a moment, Sarah spoke again, her voice softer. "It's strange, having someone else here. After David died, I got used to doing everything alone. Had to. But tonight, knowing you were here with them?" She paused, searching for words. "It felt right somehow, like I could breathe a little easier." Maxwell's heart quickened at her admission. "I'm glad," he said simply. In the dim light of the single lamp, Sarah looked both vulnerable and beautiful, her usual armor of capability momentarily lowered. Maxwell found himself wanting to reach for her hand, but hesitated, uncertain of where the boundaries lay between them. Sarah made the decision for him, leaning slightly closer. "The kids adore you, you know, even Lily, though she'd never admit it." "The feeling is mutual," Maxwell replied honestly. "They're extraordinary, Sarah. All of them. You've done an amazing job." "I've just done what I had to do," she shrugged, but her eyes betrayed how much the compliment meant to her. "No," Maxwell insisted gently. "What you had to do was keep them fed and sheltered. What you've actually done is raise 4 confident, kind, thoughtful children under circumstances that would break most people. That's not just getting by, that's extraordinary." Sarah's eyes glistened in the low light. "You always seem to see the best in us." "I see who you are," Maxwell replied simply. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Sarah was the first to break eye contact, glancing at the clock. "It's late," she said softly. "We should both get some sleep." "You take the bed," Maxwell insisted. "I'm perfectly comfortable here." After a token protest, Sarah relented, too exhausted to argue further. "Good night, Maxwell," she said, pausing at the entrance to her bedroom. "And thank you, not just for tonight, but for everything these past few weeks." "Good night, Sarah," Maxwell replied, watching as she disappeared into her room. Alone on the couch, Maxwell stared at the ceiling, processing the evening's events. He had come to care deeply for this family, not just Sarah, but each of the children with their distinct personalities and needs. It was a kind of caring he had never experienced before, simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating in its intensity. The following morning was a chaotic symphony of breakfast preparation, backpack packing, and last-minute homework checks. Maxwell, who had awoken before anyone else, had coffee brewing and toast ready by the time Sarah emerged from her bedroom, looking more rested than he expected. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, taking in the scene of Maxwell helping Jack find his missing shoe while simultaneously pouring cereal for Ethan. "I wanted to," Maxwell replied, smiling as he handed her a cup of coffee prepared just the way she liked it. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, a brief contact that sent a surprising warmth through Maxwell. Sarah's slight blush suggested she felt it too. The morning rush continued until all 4 children were dressed, fed, and ready for school. Maxwell offered to drop them off on his way to the office, an arrangement that seemed to delight everyone. Even Lily approved of the practical efficiency. As the children piled into his car, Sarah pulled Maxwell aside, her expression serious. "I was thinking, would you like to have dinner sometime? Just the 2 of us?" Maxwell felt an unexpected flutter of nervousness. "I'd like that very much." "Friday?" Sarah suggested. "My mother-in-law can watch the kids." "Friday is perfect," Maxwell agreed, trying to contain his smile. As he drove away with the children chattering in the back seat, Maxwell felt a sense of possibility that had been absent from his life for too long. The connection he was forming with Sarah felt different from anything he had experienced before. Deeper, more meaningful, grounded in mutual respect and shared values rather than superficial attraction or convenience. At the office, Maxwell found his executive team gathered in the conference room, expressions unusually somber. "What's happened?" he asked, immediately concerned. "We've got a problem," Brian Torres replied, sliding a tablet across the table. "Tech Dynamics just announced their own small business platform this morning. They're calling it Local Reach, and based on the preview, it's remarkably similar to our Local Fusion concept." "How is that possible?" Maxwell demanded, scanning the announcement. "We've kept this under tight wraps." "Not tight enough, apparently," Anna Kapoor said grimly. "They're launching in 2 weeks with aggressive pricing. We need to decide how to respond." Maxwell felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. Tech Dynamics was a major competitor with deeper pockets and a larger development team. If they beat Market Fusion to market with a similar product, the consequences could be severe. James Phillips, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I hate to say I told you so, Maxwell, but this is precisely why I was concerned about pivoting so dramatically. Now we've invested millions in a concept that's about to be preempted by our biggest competitor." "That's not helpful, James," Maxwell replied tersely. "What we need now are solutions, not recriminations." As the team debated various responses, Maxwell's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Kids talked about you all morning. Ethan says you make better toast than me. Should I be offended? Looking forward to Friday." The message brought a momentary smile to Maxwell's face before the gravity of the situation at hand reasserted itself. For the first time, his professional and personal lives seemed to be pulling him in opposite directions. The crisis at Market Fusion demanded his complete attention at precisely the moment when his relationship with Sarah was taking a significant step forward. Maxwell took a deep breath, focusing on the challenge before him. "Here's what we're going to do," he began, outlining a plan to accelerate their launch timeline while adding unique features that would differentiate Local Fusion from Tech Dynamics' offering. As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed with clear directives, James lingered behind. "I'm curious, Maxwell," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "If forced to choose between saving the company and pursuing whatever personal situation has so obviously captured your attention lately, which would you choose?" Maxwell met his gaze steadily. "That's a false dichotomy, James. I don't intend to sacrifice either." But as he returned to his office, Maxwell wasn't entirely sure he believed his own words. The next few weeks would test not only Market Fusion's future but also the fragile new connection he was building with Sarah and her children. a connection that, he was beginning to realize, mattered to him more than he had ever imagined possible. Friday evening arrived with a palpable tension in the Market Fusion offices. The team had been working around the clock to accelerate the local Fusion launch timeline, aiming to beat Tech Dynamics to market, or at least minimize their head start. Maxwell had barely left the building in 3 days, snatching a few hours of sleep on the office couch and surviving on coffee and takeout. The development team says they can have the platform ready for full launch in 10 days if we cut back on some of the secondary features, Brian reported during the afternoon's crisis meeting. Which features? Maxwell asked, rubbing his tired eyes. The community forum and the loyalty program tracking. We can add those in the next update, but they'd take too much time to perfect now. Maxwell shook his head. The community forum is what makes Local Fusion different. It's what connects these businesses to each other and creates a network effect. Keep it in. Anna Kapoor checked her watch. If we're pushing ahead with all features, we should call in the weekend team. Tech Dynamics isn't slowing down. Maxwell glanced at his own watch and felt a jolt of panic. It was almost 6 p.m. He was supposed to pick up Sarah at 7 for their dinner date. I can't stay late tonight, he said, earning surprised looks from around the table. In the past, Maxwell would have been the last to leave during a crisis. I have a personal commitment that can't be rescheduled, but I'll be back first thing tomorrow morning and I'll review everything remotely tonight after. He trailed off, not wanting to elaborate on his plans. James Phillips raised an eyebrow but said nothing. We'll manage, Anna assured him, though her expression betrayed her concern. Go handle your commitment. Maxwell left the office at 6:15, rushing home to shower and change. He texted Sarah to let her know he might be a few minutes late, then drove across town toward her apartment, his mind still partially occupied with launch strategies and competitive pricing models. He arrived at Sarah's building at 7:10, apologizing as soon as she opened the door. The words died on his lips as he took in the sight of her. Sarah was wearing a simple blue dress that highlighted her eyes, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. Without the children present and not dressed in work scrubs or casual weekend clothes, she looked different. Not more beautiful necessarily, but allowing a different facet of her beauty to shine through. You look amazing, Maxwell said sincerely. Sarah blushed slightly. Thank you. So do you. Though you also look exhausted. Maxwell grimaced. That obvious, huh? Only to someone who's an expert in functioning while exhausted, she replied with a smile. Tough week? You could say that, Maxwell acknowledged, but I don't want to talk about work tonight. This evening is about us. The word us hung in the air between them, new and significant. Sarah's smile deepened as she reached for her purse. The kids are with Elaine, David's mother, she explained as they walked to his car. She lives about 20 minutes away. She was curious about you. I imagine she would be, Maxwell replied, opening the passenger door for Sarah. What did you tell her? The truth, Sarah said simply, that you're someone special who came into our lives unexpectedly and who's been incredibly kind to all of us. Maxwell felt a warmth spread through his chest at her description. As he drove them to the restaurant he had selected, an intimate Italian place known more for its authentic cuisine than its trendiness, he found the stress of the work crisis gradually receding. How are the kids doing? He asked. I've missed them these past few days. They've missed you too, Sarah replied. Jack keeps asking when you're coming over again, and Emma made something for you at school. She made me promise not to peek. The restaurant was softly lit with candles on each table and the gentle notes of a piano playing in the background. As they were seated, Maxwell noticed Sarah looking around with appreciation. This is lovely, she said. I haven't been to a restaurant without chicken nuggets on the menu in, well, I can't remember how long. They ordered wine and appetizers, falling into easy conversation about the children, Sarah's work, and lighter topics that had nothing to do with business crises or financial struggles. For the first time in days, Maxwell felt himself truly relaxing. "So," Sarah said as their entrees arrived, "are you going to tell me what's been keeping you so busy this week? You mentioned a personal commitment that can't be rescheduled in your text earlier." Maxwell hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Our biggest competitor announced a product very similar to the one we've been developing. The small business platform I told you about. They're launching before us, which puts everything we've been working on at risk." "That's why you look so tired," Sarah said with understanding. "You've been working around the clock." "Pretty much," Maxwell admitted. "We're trying to accelerate our launch to minimize their advantage." "And yet you're here," Sarah observed, "on what must be the first break you've taken all week." "Like I said, a personal commitment that can't be rescheduled," Maxwell replied with a smile. "I wouldn't have missed tonight for anything." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand, her touch sending a current of warmth up his arm. "Thank you for that." As dinner progressed, Maxwell found himself sharing more about the business situation than he had intended, drawn out by Sarah's perceptive questions and genuine interest. "So this competitor, Tech Dynamics, they somehow found out what you were developing?" Sarah asked. Maxwell nodded grimly. "Appears that way. In our industry, intellectual property is difficult to protect until it's actually launched. And if they beat you to market? Best case scenario, we look like we're copying them instead of the other way around. Worst case, they capture the market we identified and Local Fusion becomes a secondary player in a space we should have dominated." Sarah considered this. "You know, when David was alive, he used to say that being first wasn't always an advantage. Sometimes the second company to market learns from the first one's mistakes." Maxwell looked at her with surprise. "That's actually a good point. We could see how retailers and customers respond to their product, then adjust ours accordingly. Plus," Sarah continued, warming to the topic, "you have something they don't. Real relationships with small businesses like Jenny's Diner. You've been on the ground, listening to what they actually need, not just making assumptions." Maxwell felt a surge of affection for this remarkable woman who could so effortlessly cut through to the heart of a business problem while simultaneously making him feel better about it. "You should be on my executive team," he said half-jokingly. "You've got better instincts than half my VPs." Sarah laughed. "I think I'll stick to nursing. Speaking of which," her expression grew more serious. "I have some news. I applied for the nursing program at the community college. Night classes, starting next semester." "Sarah, that's wonderful!" Maxwell exclaimed. "How did this come about?" "I had a meeting with Dr. Chen at the hospital," Sarah explained. "She told me about a new scholarship program for nursing assistants looking to advance their careers. Apparently, it was just established by an anonymous donor." Maxwell kept his expression carefully neutral, though his heart raced. He had indeed set up that scholarship fund after his meeting with Dr. Chen, but had specifically requested that his name not be attached to it. "That's quite a coincidence," he said mildly. Sarah fixed him with a knowing look. "Yes, quite a coincidence that this scholarship appeared right after you mentioned meeting with Dr. Chen. A coincidence that it perfectly fits my situation." Maxwell felt heat rise to his face. "Are you angry?" "I should be," Sarah admitted. "I don't like the idea of you pulling strings behind my back." "I didn't pull strings," Maxwell defended gently. "I just created an opportunity. You still had to apply and be accepted on your own merits, which you were because you're brilliant and dedicated." Sarah studied him for a moment, then her expression softened. "Thank you," she said simply. "It means more than I can say. But next time, please talk to me first." "I promise," Maxwell agreed, relieved that she understood his intentions. After dinner, they decided to take a walk along the riverfront near the restaurant. The night was clear, with stars visible despite the city lights. As they strolled side by side, their hands brushed, then linked together naturally. "This is nice," Sarah said softly. "Being just Sarah for an evening. Not Mom or the nursing assistant or the widow. You're always just Sarah to me, Maxwell replied, though all those other facets are part of what makes you so remarkable. They stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the water, the city skyline reflected in its dark surface. Sarah turned to face Maxwell, her expression open and vulnerable in a way he hadn't seen before. I never expected this, she admitted quietly. After David died, I thought that part of my life was over. I had the kids, my work, my plans for the future, but romance? That seemed like something for another lifetime. Maxwell gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his hand lingering on her cheek. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Maxwell, Sarah began, then paused, gathering her thoughts. I need you to understand something. My children are my world. Any relationship I have, any relationship we might have, has to take that into account. They've already lost one father. I can't let them get attached to someone who might disappear. I understand, Maxwell said solemnly, and I want you to know that my feelings extend to all of you, not just you, but Lily, Emma, Jack, and Ethan. I care about them deeply. I know you do, Sarah acknowledged. That's what makes this both wonderful and terrifying. In the gentle glow of the riverside lights, Maxwell leaned forward slowly, giving Sarah time to pull away if she wanted to. Instead, she moved closer, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like both a beginning and a culmination, gentle, searching, full of promise. When they broke apart, Sarah's eyes remained closed for a moment, as if savoring the sensation. When she opened them, her smile was radiant. That was worth waiting for, she whispered. Maxwell's phone chose that moment to buzz insistently in his pocket. He ignored it, but it immediately began buzzing again. You should check that, Sarah said. It might be important. Reluctantly, Maxwell pulled out his phone to find multiple messages from both Brian and Anna. Emergency at office. Tech Dynamics moved up launch. Need you back ASAP. Maxwell felt torn in a way he never had before. The urgent crisis at Market Fusion pulling him in one direction, the warm presence of Sarah tugging him in another. It's work, he admitted with a sigh. There's a situation I need to deal with. Sarah nodded, understanding but disappointed. Of course, you should go. I'll drive you home first, Maxwell insisted. No need, Sarah replied. My sister-in-law lives just a few blocks from here. I can call her to pick me up. You go handle your emergency. Maxwell hesitated, hating the thought of cutting their evening short. Sarah, I'm sorry. This isn't how I wanted tonight to end. I know, she assured him, reaching up to touch his face. This is your company, Maxwell. I understand that it needs you right now. He kissed her once more, briefly, but with feeling. I'll make this up to you. I'll hold you to that, Sarah replied with a small smile. As Maxwell watched her call her sister-in-law, guilt and frustration warred within him. The evening had been perfect, the connection between them deepening in exactly the way he had hoped, and now business was intruding in the most unwelcome way. By the time Maxwell reached the Market Fusion offices, the crisis room was in full swing. Developers hunched over keyboards, marketers huddled around whiteboards, and his executive team looked up with visible relief as he entered. Tech Dynamics is launching on Monday, Anna informed him without preamble. 3 days from now, they're offering a 3-month free trial to early adopters. They're trying to build their user base before we even get to market, James observed grimly. Smart move. Maxwell stripped off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, forcing his mind back into business mode. What's our status? Can we launch by Monday too? Brian shook his head. Not a chance. The earliest we could go live is Friday, and that's pushing it. Then we need a different approach, Maxwell said, his mind racing. Get me Jenny on the phone, and every other beta tester. We're going to leverage what Tech Dynamics doesn't have. Real businesses with real success stories. As the night wore on and strategies were debated and refined, Maxwell found his thoughts occasionally drifting back to Sarah, the feel of her hand in his, the softness of her lips, the understanding in her eyes as she sent him away to handle his crisis. He had meant what he said to James Phillips earlier that week. He didn't intend to sacrifice either his company or his relationship with Sarah and her children. But as the hours ticked by and Saturday's dawn approached with no end to the crisis in sight, Maxwell wondered if that choice might ultimately be taken out of his hands. The weekend passed in a blur of emergency meetings, desperate coding sessions, and strategy pivots as Market Fusion raced to respond to Tech Dynamics' accelerated launch. Maxwell had managed only a brief phone call with Sarah on Saturday evening, apologizing again for the abrupt end to their date and explaining the crisis in vague terms. She had been understanding, too understanding perhaps, assuring him that she knew his company needed him right now. "The kids are asking about you," she had mentioned before ending the call. "Ethan wanted to know if you were coming for Sunday dinner." The hopeful note in her voice had been like a physical pain in Maxwell's chest as he'd explained that he would be working straight through the weekend. "Rain check?" he'd asked, hating how corporate and non-committal the phrase sounded. By Monday morning, Tech Dynamics had launched Local Reach with a splashy marketing campaign and aggressive outreach to small businesses nationwide. The Market Fusion team watched in grim silence as their competitors' launch dominated industry news and social media. "Their user interface is slick," Brian acknowledged grudgingly as they examined the live product. "But their community features are basic compared to what we've developed, and their pricing structure is complicated. Businesses will need an accountant to figure out what they're actually paying." "We can exploit those weaknesses," Maxwell agreed, "but only if we can get to market quickly with a superior product. Where do we stand on the launch timeline?" "Friday is still our target," Anna confirmed. "The development team has been working in shifts around the clock." "And our beta testers? How are they responding to Tech Dynamics outreach?" "Jenny from the diner called this morning," Vanessa reported. "She said a Tech Dynamics rep offered her 6 months free if she signed up today and left Local Fusion. She told them, and I quote, 'I don't switch horses midstream, especially when I like the horse I'm riding.'" A tired laugh rippled through the room. "That's one loyal customer," James remarked. "What about the others?" "Mixed," Anna admitted. 3 have already jumped ship for the free offer. The rest are waiting to see what we do." Maxwell nodded grimly. "Let's make sure we don't lose any more. I want personal calls to each remaining beta tester today. Remind them of the features we're offering that Tech Dynamics doesn't, and double the free trial period for those who stay with us." As the meeting broke up, Maxwell checked his phone to find a text from Sarah. "Good luck today. We're all cheering for you." Attached was a photo of a colorful hand-drawn sign clearly made by the children. "Go Maxwell and Local Fusion." Surrounded by stars and what appeared to be robots, Jack's contribution, no doubt. The simple gesture of support from the family that had come to mean so much to him provided a moment of warmth amid the corporate warfare. Maxwell texted back, "This made my day. I'll call tonight if it's not too late." The rest of the day dissolved into a series of crisis management meetings, calls with investors to reassure them about the company's strategy, and reviews of the latest development updates. By the time Maxwell finally left the office, it was well past midnight. He collapsed into bed, setting his alarm for 5:30 a.m., and fell into a fitful sleep haunted by dreams of failing businesses and disappointed children. When his phone rang at 4:45, jolting him awake, his first thought was that it must be another crisis at the office. Instead, it was Sarah's number on the screen. "Sarah?" he answered, immediately alert. "What's wrong?" "I'm sorry to call so early," Sarah said, her voice tight with stress. "It's Ethan. He's having a bad asthma attack, worse than usual. We're at the emergency room." Maxwell was already out of bed, reaching for his clothes. "Which hospital?" "I'm on my way." "Mercy General, but Maxwell, you don't have to—" "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he interrupted firmly. True to his word, Maxwell arrived at the emergency room in record time, his hair still damp from the hasty shower he'd taken before rushing out. He found Sarah in the waiting area, looking exhausted and frightened, with the other 3 children asleep in chairs beside her. "How is he?" Maxwell asked, sitting next to her and taking her hand. "They've got him stabilized," Sarah replied, the relief evident in her voice. "His oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. The doctor wants to keep him for observation today, maybe overnight." Maxwell squeezed her hand. "What can I do?" Sarah leaned against his shoulder, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "You already did it. You came." For the next hour, Maxwell sat with Sarah and the children, speaking softly with her about what had happened. Ethan had woken in the night, struggling to breathe, his emergency inhaler providing less relief than usual, and about the doctor's concerns that his asthma might be worsening. As dawn broke, a nurse approached to let them know they could see Ethan. The little boy looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, an oxygen mask covering half his face, but his eyes lit up when he saw Maxwell. "Max!" he called weakly, reaching out a small hand. Maxwell moved to the bedside, carefully taking Ethan's hand in his. "Hey, buddy. You gave us quite a scare." "I couldn't breathe," Ethan explained seriously. "But the doctors fixed it. They have magic medicine here." "They sure do," Maxwell agreed, his heart constricting at the child's simple trust in the medical system, a system that had failed to save his father. As morning progressed, the reality of Maxwell's professional obligations began to press upon him. He had a crucial investor call at 10 a.m. that he couldn't miss, followed by an all-hands company meeting to address the tech dynamics situation. Sarah noticed his frequent glances at his watch. "You need to go to work," she said quietly, while the children were distracted by a cartoon playing on the room's small TV. "I can stay a little longer," Maxwell protested, though they both knew it wasn't really true. "Maxwell," Sarah said gently, "I understand. This is a critical week for your company. We'll be fine." The understanding in her eyes made his decision both easier and more painful. "I'll come back as soon as I can," he promised, bending to kiss her forehead. "Call me if anything changes with Ethan." "I will," she assured him. "Go save your company." Maxwell said goodbye to the children, promising Ethan he would return with a special surprise, then headed for the door. In the hallway, he was surprised to find Lily following him. "You're leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "I have to go to work for a while," Maxwell explained, kneeling to her level. "But I'll be back later today." Lily studied him with those serious eyes that seemed to see right through adult pretenses. "Mom says your company is in trouble." "It's facing some challenges," Maxwell acknowledged, not wanting to lie to her, "but we're working hard to solve them." "Is your company more important than us?" The direct question, delivered without accusation but with genuine curiosity, hit Maxwell like a physical blow. "No," he said immediately, with a conviction that surprised even himself. "Nothing is more important than you and your family." Lily considered this. "Then why are you leaving when Ethan is sick?" It was the question Maxwell had been asking himself since the moment he'd checked his watch in the hospital room. Sometimes adults have responsibilities that pull them in different directions, he tried to explain, but that doesn't mean they care any less. Lily didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. "Just come back, okay? You promised Ethan." "I promise you too," Maxwell said solemnly. "I'll be back." The drive to the office was tortuous. Every mile increasing the distance between Maxwell and the hospital made him question his choice. By the time he reached Market Fusion, he was in a dark mood that did not improve when he found James Phillips waiting in his office. "Rough night?" James inquired, eyeing Maxwell's less-than-perfect appearance. "Family emergency," Maxwell replied curtly, not wanting to elaborate. "What do you need, James?" "Victor Patel is getting nervous about Tech Dynamics' early success. He's considering reducing his investment unless we can demonstrate a clear competitive advantage." James paused significantly. "He wants to meet in person. Today." Maxwell closed his eyes briefly. Where and when? His office in San Francisco. He can see us at 4 p.m. San Francisco? That's a 6-hour round trip, not counting the meeting itself. Hence my concern about your family emergency, James said, making air quotes around the phrase. We need you focused on saving this company, Maxwell. Whatever or whoever is distracting you needs to take a back seat right now. Maxwell felt a surge of anger at James's dismissive tone. I'll be on the flight, he said coldly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for the investor call. The rest of the morning passed in a whirlwind of activity. Maxwell made it through the investor call on autopilot, reassuring nervous shareholders with confidence he didn't entirely feel. During the all-hands meeting, he rallied the troops with a passionate speech about how local fusion would ultimately prevail because of its superior understanding of small business needs. Throughout it all, his mind repeatedly drifted to the hospital where a small boy was waiting for him to return with a promised surprise, and where 3 other children were watching to see if he would keep his word. At noon, Maxwell's assistant informed him that the company jet was ready for the San Francisco trip. He'd have to leave immediately to make the meeting with Victor Patel. "One moment," Maxwell told her, stepping away to make a call. When Sarah answered, he could hear the bustle of the hospital in the background. "How's Ethan?" he asked immediately. "Better," Sarah replied. "They're talking about releasing him this evening if his next breathing test goes well." "That's great news," Maxwell said sincerely. "Sarah, I need to go to San Francisco for an emergency meeting with our lead investor. I won't be able to come back to the hospital today." The silence on the other end of the line seemed to stretch forever. "I understand," Sarah finally said, her voice carefully neutral. "Business comes first sometimes." "It's not like that," Maxwell protested. "This meeting could determine whether local fusion survives or fails." "I said I understand, Maxwell," Sarah repeated, a note of resignation creeping into her voice. "The kids will be disappointed, but they're used to it. Life has disappointed them before." The simple statement, delivered without drama or accusation, cut deeper than any angry outburst might have. "Sarah," Maxwell began, but she interrupted gently. "You should go. Your investor is waiting." After the call ended, Maxwell stood still for a long moment, his mind replaying Lily's piercing question. "Is your company more important than us?" He had answered without hesitation then. Now his actions were contradicting his words. He was choosing market fusion over a sick child who was expecting him to return. As Maxwell headed for the elevator to leave for the airport, he passed the development team's area, where Brian and a dozen programmers were huddled around a large screen displaying the local fusion interface. "Hey, Maxwell!" Brian called out. "Come take a look at this. We've added a feature that Local Reach doesn't have. A direct integration with local chambers of commerce that automatically connects businesses with others in their area." Maxwell paused, momentarily drawn in by the innovative solution. The team looked at him expectantly, proud of their work and eager for his approval. "That's excellent work," he acknowledged. "But I can't stop to review it now. I'm heading to the airport for the Patel meeting." Brian nodded understandingly. "Of course. This is just one of many improvements we're making. By Friday's launch, we'll have a product that blows Local Reach out of the water." As Maxwell continued toward the elevator, he found himself thinking about what Brian had said. The team was innovating without him, adapting to the challenge with creativity and determination. They knew what needed to be done and were executing the plan they had all created together. Did they really need him to fly to San Francisco to reassure Victor Patel, or was that something James could handle? In the elevator, Maxwell's phone buzzed with a text from Lily, who must have borrowed her mother's phone. "Ethan is asking when you're coming back with his surprise." Attached was a photo of Ethan in the hospital bed, his oxygen mask now replaced with a nasal cannula, his expression expectant and trusting. Maxwell stared at the image as the elevator descended. a war raging within him. He had spent his entire career believing that business came first, that professional success was the ultimate measure of a man's worth. That belief had cost him his marriage and left him wealthy but alone. Now, looking at Ethan's hopeful face, he wondered if he was about to make the same mistake again, sacrificing something precious on the altar of corporate ambition. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. Outside, a car was waiting to take Maxwell to the airport where the company jet was fueled and ready. James Phillips would be meeting him there, along with Anna Kapoor and the legal team, all prepared for the crucial meeting with Victor Patel. Maxwell took one step out of the elevator, then stopped. For the first time in his professional life, Maxwell Grant stood frozen in indecision, torn between the company he had built and the family that had unexpectedly captured his heart. In that moment of suspended action, everything hung in the balance: his future, the company's future, and most importantly, his promise to a little boy who had already lost one father and was waiting for him to return. Time seemed to slow as Maxwell stood in the lobby, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. Outside, the car waited to take him to the airport. His phone buzzed again, James Phillips, no doubt wondering about his delay. Maxwell looked down at the photo of Ethan once more, then at the waiting car, and suddenly the choice that had seemed so impossible became crystal clear. He stepped back into the elevator and pressed the button for the executive floor. 20 minutes later, Maxwell stood before James Phillips, Anna Kapoor, and the legal team in the conference room, his decision made. "I'm not going to San Francisco," he announced firmly. James's face darkened with anger. "Have you lost your mind? Victor Patel could withdraw his entire investment if we don't reassure him in person." "You can reassure him," Maxwell replied calmly. "You, Anna, and the legal team. You know the numbers as well as I do, and you've been skeptical of this pivot from the beginning. If you can convince Victor it's worthwhile, that will carry more weight than anything I could say." "And where will you be while we're fighting to save your company?" James demanded. "At Mercy General Hospital, keeping a promise to a 5-year-old boy." The room fell silent. Even James seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "Maxwell," Anna began cautiously, "we all understand that you've become attached to this family. But surely this meeting takes precedence over—" "No," Maxwell interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "It doesn't. And that's what I've finally realized. For years I've been telling myself that business comes first, that success is measured in market share and profit margins. I built Market Fusion on that principle, and it cost me my marriage, any semblance of a personal life, and very nearly my soul." He looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes in turn. Local Fusion was inspired by real people with real needs. People like Sarah Thompson and her children, like Jenny and her diner. If we lose sight of that, if we prioritize investor meetings over the human connections that gave this project meaning in the first place, then we've already failed, regardless of what Tech Dynamics does. James shook his head in disbelief. "This is business, Maxwell, not some Hallmark movie. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills." "Perhaps not," Maxwell conceded, "but it's what gives meaning to the work we do. You're all extraordinary at your jobs. I trust you to handle Victor Patel. Meanwhile, I'm going to keep the promise I made to a little boy who's waiting for me." Without waiting for further argument, Maxwell turned and left the room. He stopped at his office only long enough to grab his coat and make a quick phone call, then headed for the elevator. As he drove to the hospital, Maxwell felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, he had made a decision based not on what would benefit his company or advance his career, but on what he knew in his heart was right. By the time he arrived at Mercy General, it was mid-afternoon. He made a brief stop at the gift shop before heading up to Ethan's room, his step lighter than it had been in days. When he entered the room, the look of pure joy on Ethan's face was worth more than any business deal he had ever closed. "Max, you came back!" Ethan exclaimed, sitting up in bed. "Of course I did," Maxwell replied, approaching the bed. "I promised, didn't I? And I brought you something." From behind his back, Maxwell produced a stuffed gray wolf, as close as the gift shop had come to the robot he had initially planned to find. "The nurse tells me you're being very brave, and brave boys need brave animals to keep them company." Ethan clutched the wolf to his chest, his smile radiant despite his obvious fatigue. "I'm naming him Max, just like you." Sarah, who had been dozing in a chair by the window, awoke at the commotion. Her eyes widened when she saw Maxwell. "You're here," she said, clearly surprised. "But your meeting in San Francisco—" "James and the team can handle it," Maxwell replied simply. "This is where I needed to be." The significance of his choice wasn't lost on Sarah. She rose from her chair and came to stand beside him, her eyes searching his face. "You chose us over your company." "I chose what matters," Maxwell corrected gently. Lily, who had been reading quietly in the corner, set down her book and approached. "You kept your promise," she observed, the approval in her voice evident. "I did," Maxwell agreed, meeting her serious gaze. "And I always will." The hours that followed were filled with simple, precious moments, helping Jack with a puzzle book, discussing Emma's latest science facts, watching cartoons with Ethan, and sharing quiet conversations with Sarah as the children dozed. When a nurse brought dinner trays for the family, Maxwell went to the cafeteria and returned with additional food, turning the sterile hospital room into something almost resembling a family dinner. As evening approached, the doctor arrived with good news. Ethan's breathing tests had improved enough that he could go home, though he would need close monitoring and follow-up appointments. The relief on Sarah's face was palpable. "I'll drive you all home," Maxwell offered once Ethan was discharged. In the car, with Ethan safely strapped in and already half asleep clutching his new wolf, Sarah turned to Maxwell. "Did you really walk away from an important meeting for us?" "Yes," Maxwell said simply, "and I'd do it again." "Won't there be consequences?" Maxwell shrugged. "Probably. But I've realized something important, Sarah. A company can be rebuilt. Market share can be regained. But moments like today, being there when Ethan needed me, keeping my promise to all of you, those can never be recovered once they're lost." At Sarah's apartment, Maxwell helped get the tired children settled while Sarah prepared Ethan's medication. When the last bedtime story had been read and the last goodnight kiss given, they found themselves alone in the small living room. "Maxwell," Sarah began, her expression serious, "I need to say something important." Maxwell nodded, bracing himself for whatever might come. "I've been thinking about us, about where this relationship might be heading." She took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you. I think the children are too, in their own ways. But loving someone with 4 children isn't simple. It means soccer games and science projects and asthma attacks in the middle of the night. It means putting family first, even when it's inconvenient or difficult." "Like today," Maxwell said quietly. "Yes, like today," Sarah agreed. "What you did, choosing to be here instead of at your meeting, that showed me you understand what being part of this family would truly mean." "Is that what you want?" Maxwell asked, his heart racing. "For me to be part of your family?" Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I think it's what we all want. But I need to know that you're sure. That you won't wake up one day missing your old life, resenting the chaos and the noise and the constant demands." Maxwell took her hands in his. "Sarah, meeting you and the children was the best thing that ever happened to me. My old life was empty. Successful on paper but hollow inside. You've shown me what really matters, what makes life worth living." Sarah searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, she leaned forward and kissed him, a kiss filled with promise and possibility. Maxwell's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Anna Kapoor. "I should take this," he said apologetically. "It might be about the meeting." Sarah nodded understandingly. Maxwell, Anna began without preamble, I thought you'd want to know immediately. Victor Patel is doubling his investment in local fusion. What? Maxwell was stunned. How did that happen? James was surprisingly effective, Anna admitted. But what really sold Patel was when I showed him the community integration feature Brian mentioned this morning. Patel called it precisely the kind of innovation that sets us apart from tech dynamics. Maxwell smiled, thinking of his talented team working together to save the day. That's fantastic news, Anna. Thank you for handling everything. There's more, Anna continued. James has called for a board meeting tomorrow. I think he's going to try to oust you as CEO. Maxwell found that the news didn't worry him as much as it might have just days ago. Let him try, he said calmly. I'll be there. After ending the call, he explained the situation to Sarah. Could you really lose your company? She asked, concerned. It's possible, Maxwell acknowledged. But whether I remain CEO or not, Local Fusion will launch on Friday. The most important parts of what we're building will continue. And if you're not CEO anymore? What then? Maxwell smiled, a new sense of peace settling over him. Then I'll figure out what's next. Maybe start something new, something that combines business expertise with social impact. I've learned there are more important things than titles or corner offices. Sarah studied him with wonder. You've changed so much since that night at Jenny's. I've become who I was always meant to be, Maxwell replied. It just took meeting you and the children to help me see it. Friday morning arrived bright and clear. The Local Fusion team had worked miracles, accelerating the launch timeline while adding features that clearly differentiated their product from Tech Dynamics' offering. The board meeting had been contentious, but Maxwell had ultimately retained his position as CEO, though with the understanding that he would be delegating more day-to-day responsibilities to his executive team. As Maxwell prepared to take the stage for the launch presentation, he looked out at the audience. In the front row sat Sarah and the children, all dressed in their best clothes for the occasion. Emma was practically bouncing with excitement, while Lily maintained her usual composed expression, though the pride in her eyes was unmistakable. Jack was fidgeting with his tie, and Ethan, now fully recovered, clutched his stuffed wolf Max, while waving enthusiastically at the real Maxwell. Behind them sat Jenny from the diner, along with several other small business owners who had participated in the beta test. They represented the real people Local Fusion had been created to serve, not abstract market segments or data points, but individuals with dreams and struggles and determination. As Maxwell stepped up to the microphone, he felt a certainty he had never experienced before. Whatever happened with Local Fusion, whether it ultimately surpassed Tech Dynamics or not, he had already won the most important victory of his life. He had found a family, a purpose beyond profit margins, and a love that had transformed him from the inside out. "Good morning," he began, his eyes finding Sarah's in the crowd. She smiled encouragingly, and he continued with renewed confidence. "Today, we're launching more than just a platform. We're launching a community. One built on understanding that behind every small business is a person with a dream worth supporting." As applause filled the room, Maxwell knew with absolute certainty that his life had changed forever that rainy night when he had wandered into Jenny's diner and seen a mother with 4 children waiting under the awning. What had begun as a simple act of kindness, buying dinner for a struggling family, had led him to the greatest gift of all, a second chance at love, purpose, and a life of genuine meaning. And as he looked at the 5 faces in the front row, Sarah and the children who had carved out a place for him in their hearts, Maxwell silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led him to them. Some might call it coincidence or random chance. Maxwell preferred to think of it as destiny, the kind that occurs when a struggling CEO meets a mom with 4 children and discovers that in helping them, he ultimately saves himself. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.